Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool. So many other places rebuild their ruins, and then the Greeks just leave them in rubble.
Well, there's been a lot of debates about rebuilding the Greek ruins, actually, and I have a whole book about the discussion.
Oh.
And it's a really interesting read, actually. I'd lend it to you. Basically, the problem is they've been rebuilt so many times, they don't know how to rebuild, or they think rebuilding them could destroy the history that is there. Because, for instance, there was a mercenary company in Athens, and they were attacked by, I think it was the Romans, it might have been the Turks. And so they went to the most fortified location in the city, which was the that famous building.
Giant stone.
With the marble columns and whatnot. Is that the Acropolis?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a tomb.
So they went to the Acropolis, and they used it because, giant marble blocks. Yeah. So they fortified that, and the mercenaries, they carved their names into the stone and stuff while they were there, and they fought with it, and
then they rebuilt after they built those fortifications.
Yeah, and that's happened a few times. And then you look at a place like the second biggest, most important...
Parthenon?
No, the second most important building in the Muslim faith, which is the Byzantine Chapel, or whatever it's called. What's that building? Is it called the Byzantine Chapel?
Well, there's the Blue Mosque, and right next to is the Hagia Sophia.
Hagia Sophia, that's the Byzantine Chapel. Sounds fake. Yeah, Hagia Sophia. So Hagia Sophia,
the temple built for Sophia,
isn't north-south facing. So they've taken all, because Islam is based around north-south, but also facing towards Mecca. They've rotated all the internal structure of the building, like all the carpets and stuff, to face towards Mecca, so that so the building's kind of off kilter. And so if you repair it, it's like, do you get rid of the Muslim influence? And then how far back do you repair it? Like, let's say Mecca itself. If you repair Mecca, do you go back to when Muhammad conquered it, or you go back to the people Muhammad drove from it?
Yeah, well, as I understand it, the first temple, all that's left is the Wailing Wall. But the second temple, I think, was rebuilt. Because the second temple was also destroyed, but I think they rebuilt
the Wailing Wall's in Jerusalem, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so is the second temple and the way. Yeah. Because the first temple is this really cool building that was obliterated.
But that becomes a real mess, because then do you rebuild it to a Jewish aesthetic or to a Islamic aesthetic? Because it's the same structure. Because especially what Islam does is they build their temples on their conquered enemies' temples.
Yeah.
So it becomes very messy because
Well, they never conquered the first temple, though. It was the Egyptians that took the first temple and destroyed it.
But at some point, it would have been the Ottomans came in.
Yeah, the Ottomans came, and I think they took the second temple.
And so they would have... and I think the Ottomans were Muslim at that point.
Yeah.
And so they would have taken it. I was reading about the Berber people, actually. Is that...
I was just wondering if they'd still honor this.
You could try.
Yeah, I was thinking at some point.
I don't know what the law is on... So there was a legal ruling passed 10 years or something ago, I think it was, or maybe 20 years ago now, where you can't put an expiry date on gift cards because then you're buying nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so and I don't know if that's worldwide or if that was just Canada or wherever, but so there was that. But a voucher for a company that goes under and is taken over by a similar it's not the same company,
no,
right? So but on the other hand, they sort of just sell the business it gets weird. But yeah, so I was reading about the Berber people, and the it's kind of depressing, I thought, because I was actually thinking about this in general, about the entire world, basically, right? There's all these fascinating cultures everywhere, and then this tiny little section of the world, which is like Syria, Israel. That's basically it.
Yeah.
Their religion, their little shepherd religions, which is Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, have taken over the entire world. Like the Abrahamic faiths have taken over the world. And so, like the Berbers, we think of Morocco, right? That's where the Berbers lived. It was Morocco. And so, Morocco, Muslim country, so they're all Arab there. The Berbers were not Arabian. They were not Muslim. They had their own complete faith system. They're this really weird ethnic group. They're more like Italians than anything, but they're in Africa, right?
Yeah.
But they're like this Italian. They're the Atlassians, like the people of Atlantis. Like that's that region. And they have been conquered by everyone. Like, the Romans conquered them, and then during the fall of the Roman Empire, the Vandals, who are from Poland region, basically, just rampage through Rome, rampage through Spain, rampage across the Strait of Gibraltar, and then conquered the Morocco, and that region became known as Vandalia for like 200 years or something.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think is really interesting about the Vandals is they lived in Germany, Rome area, and they got kicked out. And they ended up...
In Africa.
And then they came back for revenge several generations later.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. No, they went to Africa after their revenge. But yeah.
Yeah.
But they're this completely displaced group. Yeah. And Moroccans today, like, you think about, okay, Africans, you know, you've got... They're black or they've got brown skin or something like that. Moroccans, They do have the influence of sub-Saharan Africa, but it's fairly minor still. It's like 12-14%, somewhere in there. So it's about the same as the United States, black influence. And then maybe less. The United States is 13-ish%, I think, right?
It's around 13, 12.
Yeah. So Morocco's about the same. But that's recent. Like, they weren't coming as often before. And but the people, they're made up of all the little tribes. And now Berber, by the way, if for some reason Moroccans ever listen to this, which who knows, they don't
I was actually looking at it the other day. It's Americans, UK, India, and Ukraine are the biggest demographics.
Huh. India is just statistics, right? Like, there's going to be Indians. Ukraine, that's interesting.
Well, the Ukraine's weird because also on my channel, I get a lot of Ukrainian viewers.
Now, Canada has a very strong connection with Ukraine. During the...
Well, I think my Ukrainian viewers on my channel is because of Battle Brothers.
Is that a Ukrainian company that makes...
It's just popular there. It's popular in that whole region, Germany as well.
Because, during the Holodomor, where there's that massive period of starvation in Ukraine, Canada was one of the places where a ton of Ukrainians fled to.
Yeah.
But you don't think that would influence YouTube watching so much? Like, they have a lot of family in Canada, but...
Well, also, we don't have a lot of Canadian viewers. We got American viewers.
But also, YouTube, you can look for it, but YouTube isn't going to be saying, hey, this person's Canadian and you're Ukrainian, therefore you'll like it, right? So, I don't know what that would be. Yeah, I guess the Battle Brothers.
But that's not on this channel. That's on the other one.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we get some bleed over from your channel.
I doubt it. I don't talk about my podcast at all.
Right. People stalk, though, you know?
Yeah, there might be a very small amount.
Just do a bit of casual stalking to figure it out.
I mean, the viewership on this channel is so small that, like, one person viewing can swing a percentile.
But the Moroccans, they don't like being called Berbers, or the ethnic group, and they don't like being called Berbers, because Berber, you can tell by the name, right? It's just barbarian.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of the Italian or Roman, like, those people over there are the barbarians. But, you know, the actual group in that region is like the Atlassians and the I forgot the other names. Just a ton of tiny little groups that aren't really around anymore. So the culture is all mixed up, and it's a Muslim country now. And I was thinking, it's so sad that it's a Muslim country, because this is a country that had this completely Northwest African religion.
Yeah.
No, you don't see that anywhere else on Earth. Had this very strong Roman influence, so they've got this sort of Roman cultural influence, and then they've got this like Polish-German barbarian influence out of nowhere, and then they've got this sub-Saharan Africa influence, and so they've got this really cool cultural background. But Islam is such a powerful religion; it just annihilated everything, and now they're an Islamic country.
It's one of the weird things about Egypt being Islamic.
Yeah, that's kind of a shame too, isn't it? Like,
well, the Egyptian people, though, I actually don't, like, their government's Islamic government, but I actually don't think it's overwhelming, like 90% Islamic. I think it's more like 60. But they really love the Egyptian history and the culture of the pyramids, and a lot of Muslims in Egypt work on crews. I remember watching this documentary, and there's like 7 guys named Mohammed in this one work company, all working to restore the Valley of Kings. And at the time, because it's so long ago, I was confused. Like, wait, are Muslims the people who like take sledgehammers to other religions' statues? And that was ISIS.
ISIS, yeah.
At that time, and that was my association with Islam, was ISIS. But they're doing huge amount. Like it's mostly Muslims doing Egyptian restoration.
And I'm not just picking on Islam here. Take the UK. They had this very interesting mix of, again, Roman, Viking, Celtic faiths all mixed together. And then the Romans came in, and let's see, when would the Romans have come in? So the Romans would have been Christian by then. So the Romans came in and just Christianized the whole place, just pow.
All the way to Scotland.
Yeah. And then, like, Greece, you've got this ancient Greek faiths, pow, Greek Orthodox now. So at least that is the one thing, apparently I don't know if Islamics, imams, I guess, do this. It's not quite imams because it's the converter people I'm talking about. It's not so much the priests, but so the Jesuit missionaries, right? So missionaries, right? I don't know if Islamic missionaries do this, but the Christian missionaries were very happy to adapt Christianity in order to convince people to convert. So, for instance, when they were dealing with the Viking people, like the Norse, they would say, so there was this baby called Jesus, and he was born in Jerusalemburg, and there was Abraham or something. Like they would change all the names. They'd be like, instead of Jesus wandering through a desert, they had him wandering through the woods. Yeah. And like all the.
I think it's probably region to region and also like sect to sect, because the French conversion, so the conversion of the Frank barbarians, I can't remember. So there was this one kingdom, if I remember that's right, it's quite a big one in France. The guy died. And they had the same tradition as the Germans at the time, is it gets split between all your sons. So it's split between his 3 sons. One of the sons murdered his 2 other brothers, took over a very large region. And instead of sitting there, basically said, all right, we're Christian now, and we're going to go around, and every single person you can either convert or die. And that was the conversion of all France.
Yeah.
Was that one guy.
And then France started pushing out and converting everyone around them.
Yeah.
And there was... What was the interesting thing? It's easier. So the barbarian cultures couldn't form Dan Carlin did a show about this recently called The Last of the Aesir, where he pointed out that in Viking culture, for instance, whoever gave out the most gifts was sort of king.
Yeah.
But that meant that when you died, your son didn't take over. The next best gift giver took over. Except your entire they didn't really have kingdoms, they had gangs, and your gang fell apart, and then a bunch of new gangs were formed.
Yeah.
So you couldn't ever rival an empire because you were restarting from zero every single time. You have crazy, ridiculously amazing people, like Harold Fairhair, whatever his name was, Canute, those sort of people. Well, Canute might have been Christian by that point.
Canute was a king, he was Christian.
Yeah, so before Canute, but like the original, like amazing Vikings, right? Yeah. They were able to actually form these great empires.
Ivar the Boneless.
Yeah, on like charisma alone.
Yeah.
But the moment they died, they fell apart.
Yeah.
And you had to start from square one all over again. Whereas,
Ivan, not Ivar.
Whereas with the Christians, they said, this was given to me by God, therefore it doesn't matter who's in charge. It's a much more stable form of government.
It's pretty good technology.
And so Christianity was actually a great way to also conquer a place, because if you convert the barbarians to Christian, then they see you as as chosen by God, and so they follow you. Yeah. Whereas if you just conquer the Vikings, they're going to fight you constantly every step of the way, because it's like, who said you're king? I'm going to go somewhere else. Like you saw that happen with Harald Hardrada, was that his name? The first king of Norway. Yeah. He when he conquered all of Norway, a bunch of Vikings were like, no, and they left and they founded Greenland.
Yeah.
Iceland. They founded Iceland. And probably killed all the monks that, or I don't know if the monks had left already. But them. Yeah, but
that was actually something I learned recently. They integrated with the monks.
Oh, I was reading in my I wanted to look up Taliesin. He's a bard. He's the greatest of the bards.
Okay.
And so I was trying to
never leveled up to druid.
Well, he was kind of the first druid or something possibly. Oh, okay. He's Merlin's father.
Oh.
Or in sort of. He better way to put it might be, he is Gandalf the Grey and Merlin is Gandalf the White.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different myths, right? But basically, he died, was reincarnated as Merlin.
Right.
And a bunch of them. So but when I was reading about Taliesin, because there's very little information about him, I was going through my books on Celtic mythology.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how there's ankhs carved into like monoliths in Ireland. And then there's all these Irish myths about how they came from Egypt. And then there's also all this vague historical evidence about how the Irish came from Egypt, and they're independent sort of avenues, and now none of them are fully concrete. Yeah. But you look at it and you're like, the Irish came from Egypt, right? Like the Irish came from Egypt. And there's a lot of, I think there's mythological overlap. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but where was I going with that? With
Bard.
Well, that was more of the side thing, but the Vikings and I lost it.
What you were saying earlier, though, it's like we have these three, to call it, rudely, sand religions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, it wasn't sandy at the time, though. That's actually one of the things people say, oh, those are the sand religions. That area was, like, ridiculously lush at that time when they were around. But, so we've got the three Abraham religions. What are the other religions? So we've got...
Like the big ones?
Yeah.
We've got Hindus.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, everything else is basically Eastern that we have left over. Because we've got Shinto, we've got Hindu, we've got, what was it? Confucianism. Well, that was kind of
It was failed. They tried to destroy it, but they failed.
Yeah.
So Confucianism is so powerful that even an active effort couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah. Buddhism.
Yeah, Buddhism's probably the biggest besides the Abrahamic ones.
Is it really?
Well, maybe Hinduism.
Yeah, I feel like Hindu's bigger. Hindu and...
Well, Indians are also Buddhist, though, right? So
are they both at the same time, or is it like a mix?
They have a bunch of different religions in India. The Sikh are also Indian.
Yeah, the Sikhs. So that's a different... They're a pretty small group, though, but
they're
a very powerful faith.
They tend to be in positions of power, kind of like the Jews.
Yeah, well, the Sikh is also interesting because...
Sikh is kind of basically an Abrahamic faith, because it was formed as a counter to Islam.
Yeah.
It was designed to protect other religious groups from Islam.
I actually don't know a whole lot about Sikhism or what, like their temples, their worship.
Hinduism...
It'd be interesting to learn more, because I know about Hindus, I know about Buddhism,
the fun thing about Hinduism, actually, it's kind of an Abrahamic faith as well, in a way, because what Hindus do is your missionary comes to a Hindu. Like, you know how a Shinto, it's more of a cultural lifestyle?
Yeah.
And so you can be a Shinto Christian, you can be a Shinto... Yeah. So the Hindus, they don't quite do...
It's very rare to be a Shinto Christian. It's more like they're also just Shinto at the same time.
But if I don't know if you've ever seen, like, a graph of the religions of Japan.
Yeah.
And it's like 75% Christian, 50% Shinto, and it's like, wait a minute, this is over 100%.
Yeah, and they have Buddhism there. And
it's like, how does this adds up to more than 100%? Yeah. But so Hinduism, you come and you say, okay, so there's this guy called Jesus, he came back from the dead, he died for our sins. They're like, awesome, yeah, we'll worship him. Like, really? Yep. All right, we'll stick him right next to Vishnu, and he is one of the 10,000 gods now. We'll just add your god to our collection. Now we've
Hindu has
lots of gods.
Yeah, has lots of gods, but it also has, like, is Hindu one of the few left? Like, you have the Zeus worshippers at the Temple of Zeus, and that's their main thing, and they're a part of the Greek religion. And then you've got, like, the Artemis worshippers at the Temple of Artemis.
I think Hindu just worships Shiva, basically.
Okay, because there's the Kali cultists.
Yeah, well, they would be the exception.
There's the destroyer cultists as well, who aren't Kali. What's the destroyer god?
Kali is the god of destruction. Yeah, the Thuggies worship her. The thugs.
No, what's the male destruction god? Vishnu?
That might be Vishnu, yeah. Okay. Shiva might be the god of destruction, though.
Shiva, yeah, sorry. There's also the Shiva worship.
Yeah, but Shiva is everyone's an aspect of Vishnu, I think, right?
Oh, okay.
So, except, well, even Kali probably, but the thugs worship Kali specifically. Yeah. And they're, I believe there was a bit of a purge of the thugs by the Indian government, like a long time ago. So I don't think there's really any... If there are thugs around, they're not public about it anymore.
But
I think there has been some cases of, like, weird murders in India where they're thugs, but...
all of America, South and North and Central, is Christian.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Mayans and the Aztecs and whatnot, they had these...
And the Peruvians.
They had these crazy faiths that were... Now, the Aztec religion, I still don't understand. I've talked about it, I think, right? How they worship the god of evil. Like, they knowingly worshipped the evil god who had kicked out the rightful god from their lands.
Yeah.
I guess out of fear, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
But, so if you say Jesus is Quetzalcoatl, then Mexico now is actually more in line with what it should be than what it was.
So, let's see, Africa has its very small groups.
Africans are just Christians and Muslims, basically.
Yeah, well, I'm saying they're mostly Christian. Like, there's African gods, but it's the same thing like the Greek or Norse gods. They're not... Like, there's a few people who worship them. Like, up here, we actually have a ridiculous amount of Norse pagans. Like, they're not from Norway, but they worship
There's
the Norse
also...
gods.
I guess pagan is the best way to describe it, but we have... in Europe, they have people that still kind of worship the old gods, right? And then here we have First Nations, and in the States.
Well, the First Nations, I was going to countermeasure that. The First Nations got the same... It just hasn't been around long enough. They have the same thing that the Norse had, or the Franks, or like, oh, do this. Like, they have Creator, and Creator Mary, and they have all the stories around. But if you really look at it, the missionaries basically converted them. Yeah,
and even the First Nations around who worship their gods, like or they don't really have gods, they have spirits, right? And so they'll talk about the spirits and they'll talk about the sacred land, but that's not quite a religion.
Well, when I've heard them give their prayers, like this elder will give a prayer, and it's a First Nation flavored Christian prayer.
Or they worship the spirit of the land, but that's more of a respect thing rather than like, this is a god that will send me to heaven type thing.
Yeah.
And I think the Navajo might be the strongest faith, First Nation faith still around, because they actually have beliefs and rituals and sacred symbols and all that sort of thing. But I don't know how many of the Navajo actually believe that or not.
What is the Lama's religion?
I couldn't tell you. I knew it at some point, but yeah.
But that might be like old faith.
Yeah, that's one of them that's sort of remained. Actually, funny story, though, about the First Nations around here, at least. So, Taliesin, I mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
So, I want to talk about how he came to exist, because he wasn't born in a normal way. So, there was this woman, and she was wife to a duke or a king, I think, and high up. She was a very powerful, very smart woman.
Yeah.
Her husband was a very powerful man. They had a kid who was... I can't remember the description. They called him the dark... what did they call him? They called him, like, Crow Face or the Dark One or something like that. Like, he was... one description was something like he was ugly in every way. He was just horrible, pathetic, stupid, lazy, weak. Yeah. He was hopeless. And in a way that made you feel sorry for him, though. It was just like he got the Habsburg luck of the draw type thing, you know. Yeah. It was quite unfortunate. So using her magic, she created she developed a alchemical potion, like a recipe, that would allow her to distill all the knowledge of everything into 3 drops of liquid, and then she'd feed them to him, and then he would have all the wisdom in the world, so he could become the greatest magician, the greatest... Yeah. He could see the future, see the past, he would know everything. Yeah. So this potion, it would take all these rare ingredients, which she gathered together, and then it needed to brew for a year and a day on top of a fire. And so she hired this old blind man to, depending on the myth, it's kind of the teller, he has one of 2 jobs. And it seems to me that one of them is way more obvious a choice than the other. It's either to feed the fire or to stir the pot. Now, if you hire a blind man, do you hire him to go and get firewood and put it into a fire, or do you hire him to stir a pot? I'm going with the stirring the pot. Yeah. But the blind man had an assistant who was a little boy who would, help him get around, help him walk around. And that boy then either was the one who stirred the pot or fed the fire, depending on which one the blind man was doing. Yeah. Right. So I do like the one where the blind man actually feeds the fire more, though, even though it makes less sense to me, because then it makes more sense what the boy ends up doing. So the boy was the one stirring the pot, so they had to stir it for a year and a day. Mm. And so just as the potion was coming near to completion, there's several different ways the story goes here as well. So in one of them, the pot is almost done, and then it spits up a bit, because, it's low on liquid. Yeah. So there's a spit, and it lands on the boy's thumb, and he's like, ow, and he sucks his thumb, and he gets all the potion himself, like the not her son, but the boy she hired to stir the pot. And then in the other one, this one's weird. I think it's made to make Taliesin look better. The pot spits up, and the drops go flying towards the crow boy, or the dark one, whatever his name was. and the boy she hired pushes him out of the way and intercepts it with and he gets it instead. And so I think it's meant to make him seem clever that he actually wanted it for himself rather than being an accident, right? Yeah. So either way, he ingests the potion instead of the one who's supposed to ingest it. And then in some myths, she either immediately gets angry and tries to kill him, or in others, she's not there. Yeah. And because he drank either way, right? He got this potion, so he can see the future, and he's like, she's gonna kill me. Yeah. So he hightails it out of there. But she's a very powerful witch, so she hunts him down. She's not actually a witch, but it's the sort of Celtic thing where, people who are wise just have magical powers. Yeah. Right? Like the more you know, the more magic you have.
Yes.
And so she hunts him down and is able to catch him. And then they have a shapeshifter duel, which you see all the time in these Celtic stories. And so she turns into like I can't remember. Like she turns into like a bull and he turns into a fox and tries to escape. And then he jumps into the river as a fish and she turns into a stork and is about to catch him. And so he slips out, he turns into a snake or something, slips out, and he goes into a barn and he turns into a grain of
wheat.
Wheat, yeah. He turns into a grain of wheat and hides in a pile of wheat. And this does nothing. She turns into a hen and eats him. Just like instantly. So I don't like the myths don't say she ate every grain. It's just like she eats them.
Yeah.
And so as naturally,
she gives birth to...
because I didn't take biology 12, but I'm pretty sure this makes sense. She becomes pregnant with this boy, and then she gives birth to him 9 months later, and she plans to immediately kill him afterwards.
Oh, so she knows that it's him.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very much like Yzma in... I'll put him in a box, and I'll put that box in a bigger box, and I'll mail it to myself, and I'll smash it with a hammer.
I will carry you to term so I can murder you.
Yeah. Well, it's not that... that was swallowing him, the plan wasn't to get pregnant. Yeah. It's just she knows she's pregnant with him.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way to get pregnant except eating sentient grains of wheat, I think. Yeah. As far as I understand. So...
Well, there's one other way, which you'll get to.
Well, okay, so she gives birth
to... It involves eating something else.
Oh, I see, yes. So she gives birth to this boy. And, that was a question I was going to ask you, was does this myth seem familiar slightly? So she gives birth to this boy, and she's going to kill him, but she can't bear to kill her own child.
Yeah.
So instead, she sticks him in a sack and throws the sack into the river. Because, she's soft at heart.
Yeah.
And then the sack floats down the river, and Moses style, there's a man who's out with his idiot son, and that was the other thing. The man's name is Gwynedd, I believe, and he's like a rich man. He's not a noble, but he's like a rich man or something, and so he owned the stream. And when the 3 drops spit from the pot and the boy ate them, he tipped over the pot in his flight, or by not putting the drops back in, it ruined the potion and it caused the liquid to go everywhere, the remaining liquid. And that liquid poisoned the stream and made the entire thing poisonous forever. And so the stream was renamed to Gwynedd's Poisonous Stream. And I think that stream is a real stream. I didn't look it up, but... it's said with the air of historical record. Yeah. So the owner of this stream, they don't say if he was upset or not, but he's...
So she chucks her child into a poisonous stream.
Well, I think it was a different stream, but I'm not sure. Anyways, this rich man, his son's an idiot, and his son has spent all his money.
Yeah.
And so not only is his stream poisoned, but his son's now wasted all his money. And so he says to his son, I'm not giving you any more money. And his son's like, well, then I'm going to starve to death. And he's like, okay, you know what? Fine. I own a fishing spot by the ocean. You can go there, and whatever you catch is yours. So his idiot son goes out to the sea, and he throws out his fishing line or his net or whatever it is. Probably a net. And he pulls in this leather sack, and he cuts open the sack. And now, idiot is probably too hard. He's not like a moron. He's just... nowhere.
Foolish?
Yeah, he's foolish. Like, he doesn't lose all his money, he's not a wastrel. It's just, this beggars take advantage of him, or he invests in something he shouldn't, right? He's I think they call him luckless.
Yeah.
And so anyways, he cuts open the sack, and he's immediately blinded by the baby's shiny forehead. And so he says, "Why, what a shiny forehead." Now, there is a different translation, which is radiant brow. But shiny forehead is one of the translations, which I prefer. It's the same thing, right? Yeah. Radiant brow, shiny forehead. But he's like, wow, what a shiny forehead. So that's what you shall be named. So he called him Shiny Forehead, which is Taliesin. And then he's like, well, I guess I get to keep it because I was told I could keep whatever I fished from the fishing spot. Yeah. And I can't remember. I don't think he was about to throw the baby back or something. He's just like, what am I going to do with this? And then the baby says to him, okay, listen to me and I will turn your fortunes around.
Well, so he fishes Puss in Boots out of the ocean.
Yes. This is Puss in Boots. Like from then on, it's Puss in Boots. And so he tells him to do all these things. And I can't remember what they are, but he becomes this very rich, very happy man that's loved by the community. And so everyone loves him, right? Because he's been listening to his Puss in Boots baby. Yeah. And then he says, as the years go on, he's giving a toast at some inn and everyone's saying, well, you're so wonderful and you're so lucky. He's like, yes, well, it's not just me, for I have the most faithful wife in all of creation, in all of England, or Great Britain, because this is meant to be during like King Arthur's time. So it was united in a sort of mythological sense. Yeah. We don't know if it was or not, but mythologically it was Great Britain. And so he's like, I have the greatest wife in all of Britain. And I have the most chaste wife in all of Britain. And my son is the greatest bard. And so, depending on the story, King Arthur or King Arthur's uncle hears this.
Uther.
No, Uther was his father. His uncle was the king.
Okay. I thought Uther was the king.
He becomes the king, but his uncle's name was Ambrosius Aurelius.
Okay.
Sounds very Roman to me.
Well, the Bretons were Roman.
But Arthur was fighting the Romans.
Yes, but they were Romans. If you look at their armor is weird. If you look at the armor that Arthur's father wore and the people who are most likely to be the Bretons, it looks like this weird hybrid between Roman and British armor and like appearances. It is bizarre looking stuff.
Because when Mordred takes over the kingdom, Arthur's over in Europe fighting the Romans. Yeah. And that's how the kingdom's left unguarded, basically.
Yeah, no, but their culture is weird.
Yeah, well, there's this interesting debate about, is it a culture of Brittany or is it a culture of Britain?
Yeah.
Because, that's France or the UK, basically. And there's these arguments for both, which I was reading in the Celtic book, which is interesting. But going back to, so let's say King Arthur, although this doesn't seem like something King Arthur would do, so I'm almost tempted to say Aurelius. Yeah. But King Arthur hears of this boast, and he's like, hey, you can't say that. My wife is the best, and my bard is the best, so you're going to prison. So he grabs...
Well, how would it make sense as Arthur if Merlin's not even there yet?
Well, yeah, that's another problem. So, because the Dark Ages were called the Dark Ages for a reason. Even the mythology is a mess that we know nothing about. Yeah. So he grabs... Okay, so maybe we should call it Aurelius, just to be less... Although I like Marcus Aurelius. We'll call him Ambrosius. Yeah. Okay. And then there's another king entirely that it's also attributed to. But we'll go with Ambrosius. So Ambrosius, very upset, throws Taliesin's father into prison. And where he takes them all the way back to the capital, whatever it was called.
Camelot?
Camel, maybe. The capital of the UK was... Oh, that was after the Vikings they had a capital. So yeah, probably Camelot, I guess. Yeah. So he takes him to Camelot, throws him in prison. Because London was not the capital. London was a fort. And the reason it's the capital now is because it was the only place that the Vikings couldn't conquer.
Yeah, the bridge was a part of the fort.
Oh.
London Bridge was this terrifying siege installment, which whenever you went up the river, there's like catapults all over it, and Viking mercenaries were crawling all over it.
There's also that battleship right near it, which would help.
Well, that's one of the things I actually love about London Bridge. There's this huge battle of London Bridge. This was before the reign of King Canute, and the majority of the people who fought were Vikings. And it was Vikings versus Vikings because a huge group of Viking mercenaries were hired to defend London, and a huge group of Viking mercenaries attacked it. And so it's just Viking mercenaries fighting.
So Taliesin's father's brought to Camelot and thrown into prison. And he says, no, I'm not a liar. And he said, I'm telling the truth. My wife is the most chaste woman there is. And so...
She hasn't even been with me.
So Ambrosius... Well, that's basically what Ambrosius... well, not quite. So Ambrosius says, well, my cousin Rufus is the most handsome man alive, and all women want to sleep with him. So I'm going to send Rufus to go determine if your wife is as chaste as they say. And so he sends Rufus off. And then the little magic baby, who's now a grown man, says and the wife's like, oh no, what do we do? Rufus is coming. Which
I can't resist his charm. He's basically Dear Dubney.
Which, looking back, is kind of telling that she might not be the most chaste woman out there.
Well, no, Rufus could be Dear Dubney. Levels of handsome.
Yeah.
Like, he could have a magic love spot.
Yeah. So he says, fear not. This is what you do. Switch clothes with your maid. And then when he comes in, you just be sweeping the kitchen and have her in the main room.
Or Rufus is a rapist.
Just wait. So Rufus comes in. And he goes to the maid, and they start talking, and they're having this great time, and talking.
Yeah.
I have to be clear. This is not a euphemism. They're having a great time talking. He's a very charming man. He's very handsome. And so they're drinking lots of wine. And he either slips her something, or it's just enough of the wine, knocks her out. Knocks the maid out. So then Rufus has his way with her.
Yeah.
And then he cuts off her finger with her signet ring on it, because she switched jewelry with the woman, right? To prove that he slept with her. And he takes it back to Camelot.
But because the finger's cut off.
Well, so Ambrosius goes to the his name was Elphin? I think
Elfine?
Elphin.
Okay.
I think his name was Elphin, was Talisin's father.
Right.
So he goes to Elphin, and he says, see, here's your wife's finger. I have proof that she's not chaste. Here's her signet ring.
And then he's like, you bastard, you cut off my wife's finger!
No, he takes his finger and he's like, well, no. And then he laughs and he's like, no, see, this is proof. Because even though this is my wife's ring, and that I will not deny, this is not her finger, because my wife, she trims her fingernails every day, and this has not been trimmed in at least 2 weeks. And my wife has not look how rough the calluses are at the tips. This person has been kneading dough. My wife has not needed to knead dough since I married her. And so this cannot be my wife's finger. And
the poor maid.
Yeah, the story doesn't talk about the maid, and I was like, come on. And so Ambrosius is like, okay, fine, maybe your wife is the most chaste woman in all the lands.
My rapist cousin.
Even though they didn't actually test the theory, right? They just had him rape your maid and then cut her finger off, but I guess that proves something. So he's like, okay, well, fine, I guess I was wrong. But you still haven't proven your son's the best bard in the land, so I'm going to throw you into prison again. And so he throws him into prison. And then and then Taliesin comes and he says, fear not, father, I'll take care of this. And so he
has a bard off?
Not quite, because Taliesin, as established earlier, as you can tell, is a bit of a jerk.
Bit of a shyster.
Just the way he helps people that he loves, but he's a bit of a psychopath, isn't he? I mean, the way I don't know. So he comes in and he says to the king, I challenge your bards to a duel to see who is the greatest bard in all the lands. And
he poisons all the other bards?
No, he casts a spell on them.
Oh, okay.
So he covers his mouth, so they can't see what he's doing. He looks away. And then he whispers Now, in all the texts, it's a variant of the blur 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 spell. And he moved his fingers in a secret way, right? But I think what they're trying to say, actually, is he went... Because it actually makes sense in context of the story.
Okay.
But it's hard to write down, right? So I think that's actually what he did, was he went... He just kind of ran his fingers back and forth across his lips.
All right.
His finger back and forth across his lips. And so he whispers, like... And then he goes before the greatest bards in all of Camelot. And he says, very well, let's hear your songs. And so then all the other bards can do is go... And so the king's like, okay, bards, perform for me. And they all just go...
So is he actually the greatest bard? Or is he the best trickster?
And then the king's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is stupid. Come on, you're a great bard. You can do better than this. Because, it's kind of weird because in a lot of stories, that would be it. It'd be like, oh, wow, these guys are terrible, right? Mm. But the king, these people have been playing in his court for decades, right? So he's like, what are you doing? Stop acting like idiots or I'll cut your heads off. Start playing properly. And then the typical fairy tale thing would be like, they'd try again and they fail and try again and the king executes them. But instead they just have a little conflict dispute and they say to the king, he's clearly cast a spell on us. We can't do anything but go... And so the king goes, what? Who do you think you are? And then he kind of does it. Taliesin does this dramatic flourish, or he probably throws back his cloak and he pulls out his lyre.
Yeah. And
he sings a song, which slightly annoys me that I'll give you the gist because I don't have it memorized, obviously. But it's a very long song, apparently. But in both versions I read, it's quite short. And in one of them, they even say, I won't copy the whole song here for sake of brevity. But earlier in that book, because it's a scholarly work I was reading, the guy talks about how there's so many works that are lost, and the only record we have of them is what people recorded in their books. But there are things that they didn't bother to record because it was so obviously accessible to everyone, right? It's like, you're doing the same thing here with this poem, man. Like, I'm sure you can find the full version somewhere, but just record the whole version of your poem. So Taliesin goes on this long speech about how, so basically his poem is, I am Taliesin, first of the bards, I was there when
So it's actually a diss track rap of saying how great he is.
Sort of. It's kind of weird. It's very Christian, which is suspicious, but it's not just Christian. It's very Roman as well. But he says, I stood on the banner at the front of Alexander's armies. I was there, or I was the one bearing the banner of Alexander's armies, maybe. I stood on the cross when Christ was crucified. I was, what was the other big one? Like the sort of big Christian events, he was at all of them, and then he was at the head of Alexander the Great's armies, and he was he's basically the spirit of glory. Yeah. I guess is the way you could look at it. And the king goes, "Oh wow, okay, I guess I'll let your dad out of prison then." So he does, and that's most of what there is to know about him. But point being, he's the spirit of enlightenment and wisdom who was birthed from being swallowed by a woman of power, which is very similar to some of the First Nation myths.
Yes.
Such as the one of Raven, where he turned himself into a pine needle, and then he was swallowed by God's daughter, basically.
Yeah.
And then she gave birth to a baby, and then that baby stole all of God's toys. Yeah. Well, Raven is basically Prometheus. He steals the light and gives it to the people, but he and in a way, Taliesin, he stole knowledge and he gave it to the world. He's very similar to someone like Pythagoras, who went around everywhere and took all the knowledge of all the cults, and then he gave it to the world and taught the world math.
So how did Taliesin become Merlin?
He died.
Yeah.
And then
an old man of Merlin was born, and Merlin ages backwards.
I don't know if Merlin ages backwards all the time, because the first story I read of King Arthur way back when I was very young was of Uther, I think, who was going to build Camelot. Oh wait, so this whole story I just told wasn't in Camelot because Camelot wasn't built yet.
Okay.
Oh, I have to start again. Okay, so so Uther was going to build Camelot, and here's the problem with Monty Python. I'm either getting it mixed up with Monty Python, or because Monty Python, they were all educated in the classics, right? They're English majors, most of them. They were basing this on something. But I think what happened was Uther kept trying to build castles, and they kept sinking into swamps. I think. And so he's like, okay, I don't know what to do. Where do I build a castle that will guarantee my kingdom? And so someone comes to him and says,
find the mightiest tree in the forest and cut it down with a herring, and that's where you will build your castle.
No, it's... Okay, let's see if I can remember this story, because it's weird. Basically, they say, okay, there's a boy in the town. Go to him. He goes to a soothsayer or something, and he says, where do I build this castle? And they say, there's a boy in the town. Go and ask him. And so he goes, and there's a boy playing with a hoop and stick, and having a whale of a time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And he goes to him, and he says, where do I build my castle? And the boy says... Go to... The thing the boy does that's weird is, he says something like, go to the lowest spot you can find and dig in the earth there, and there will be your answer. It's something like that. It's a non-tactical position. So I think that's how it went. So... And that little boy is Merlin.
Yeah.
And so he takes the boy along with him, for some reason. And maybe Rufus wants a spare. And he goes... And he goes down... He finds the spot, and he digs at the spot, and they find a bottle. And he opens the bottle, and I think 2 tents come out of it. And one's red and one is blue. And then out of the tents come these 2 giant dragons. And the dragons start fighting. And the boy says, one of those is It's like you and the others, your enemies, and watch where their blood spills, and that is where you should build your castle. It's very like Aztec, Mexico type thing, right? Very Texacotl type thing. But, and I think there's a few more layers too, like the tents, an army comes out of the tent, and then the army's killed, and from them comes the, there's one of those weird cyclical things. And so anyways, so Merlin was a little boy in that story.
Something else that confuses me about Arthurian mythology is Arthur is the son of Uther, and Uther is the king.
Yeah.
But whoever draws the sword from the stone becomes the king. And the sword is meant to, like, prove who's king. So how does that whole debacle go on? Is it only the king's son could draw the sword? Like, why didn't people just go, oh, Arthur should have the sword? Or is it proving that Arthur is the son of the king?
So Arthur was like an incest bastard.
Oh, okay. So was he like the child of a maid, or?
He's Uther's cousin's kid, I believe. And Uther went to Merlin to say, transform me so I can seduce her.
How bad is Mordred's genetics?
Because then, Mordred is Morgana Le Fay and Arthur, and they're half siblings or something. Yeah. So I think Arthur was probably...
So Arthur was some like bastard child that they wanted out of the picture.
Yeah, and they might not have told him his parentage, I guess. Okay. The other thing about Arthurian legend, which makes it tricky, is there's T.H. White's The Sword and the Stone, which is where a lot of it comes from. But before that, there was
all the French people.
Le Mot d'Arthur, or whatever, which is also told like 1,000 years after the first legends. And then the legends
are really hard to track down.
They kind of built up over time, and there's no like first-hand accounts of like this is the story. But there is a lot of accounts. There's a historical account from the 1600s. We don't have the record the guy's talking about, but in the historical account, he says most of that stuff is just nonsense storytelling, mythology, that sort of thing. But this account I'm going to recount to you here is the best historical stuff I can find. And so we've got like, third hand of this guy's opinion on what the best stuff was at his time back in the 1600s. But this is like the 500s we're talking about, except in that one thing I read, Arthur was around during Julius Caesar's time, which that's like 550 more years in the past from that even. There's I heard about this recently. I didn't look into it, but apparently there is some theories that the calendar is wrong, like history has events out of order, which makes it room for like, an extra 100 years here.
Well, we have the Dark Age. Like literally the Dark Age is part of... I heard this recently about the Legendarium of Tolkien, which is someone saying the reason why Tolkien's story is so much greater than just someone's like other fantasy book is Tolkien didn't just write it to be a story. He wrote it to be the founding myth of the UK, because their myth was destroyed by the Romans and everything else, and the French and all different like things that happened in the Dark Ages. And it's meant to be the best founding myth that Tolkien, arguably one of the better historians and myth writer, like knowledgeable people in the world at that point, created for them.
Yeah. And
like you have one of the foremost experts on etymology and mythology create what he thinks would be a mythos worthy for his people.
Yeah, because everything was sort of lost. And you look at stuff like the Fight Book, which is the 1500s, so 1,000 years after King Arthur. But you see stuff like diving gear in it, and like diving gear that works. This stuff has been built and tested, and it works. And so you go...
Well, I learned about it's called the Bible, the Crossbow Bible. And it's a collection of different crossbows and different crossbow bolts. And it's basically like all of them that we've made, like arbalist crossbows. And the guy who was talking about, he's a crossbow maker in modern day and makes medieval crossbows. And he's saying, I have only ever come across one of this type of crossbow from this guy's collection, and I made a replica of it. It also happens to be in this Bible. Now, there are things in the crossbow Bible that we have no historical records of actually being made. And no one's paid to have them made. And like, there's these really weird bolts in there. Like, there's a bolt, the cannonball with the chain that splits off?
Yeah.
In there's a crossbow bolt that when you fire and it spreads out and there's like a rope in between. And it's in there. Apparently it's a thing in this Bible.
Huh. I guess if you had like a garret, it could actually...
Yeah, as you said, like the Bow book has things, and this is just a guy's like ideas he wrote down or something.
I think what those sort of books show is that potentially the Dark Ages were not Dark Ages to them. What it could just be that it's a statistical blip of we don't have any records from that time because records get lost all the time, and they just so happen to clump in this like 500-year period or 1,000-year period even.
Yes. In Wheel of Time,
There's
this is back on crossbows.
Attila the Hun would have been around roughly the same time as King Arthur.
Yeah. So in Wheel of Time, Matt has the special crossbows that he has. And the crossbows are like lever action crossbows. Is that like they load and fire really fast?
It's been a long time since I read Wheel of Time, but yeah.
So I was looking up this same guy. It's Todd from Todd's Workshop. He has makes crossbows. And he's showing off different ways to load crossbows. So there's this weird claw, which your crossbow has to be designed to accept it. But you hook it onto a crossbow, and you just draw it back. And it gives you an 8-time draw power, like that leverage advantage. And there's no like windlass special winches or anything going on. It's just an 8-time power to draw the crossbow. There's, of course, the windlass, which is one of the most powerful draw things.
Yeah, that's a siege bow for just... Yeah.
So there is this metal thing you can hook onto crossbows and crank it, and it can give a mechanical advantage greater than a windlass, and it's easier to attach and easier to use. And was most popular for German hunting crossbows. So a German noble would be on his horse, and he would load it up and fire it at a boar to kill a boar. So it was a boar-killing crossbow.
Wow.
And also a group of raiders really liked it. So they would be on the horseback, and you plant it against your hip, and you quickly wind it up, and you'd fire it. And it's just this thing I never knew about. It's just like this metal thing. So it's attached to your belt, and you hook it on, and then you crank it, and then you take it off your belt. There's a belt you can put on which helps you like draw crossbows back. Like they're this insane piece of technology with so many different things. But the winch one was super cool. Because the windlass, I like the windlass, but they're so impractical. Like it takes you like 20 seconds or something to load a windlass. And then this crank thing's like 10.
I saw, it was just today, I think, Spirit of the Law released a video about historical inaccuracies in Age of Wonders, Empires. And he talks about how torsion versus counterweight technology was developed and how counterweight allows much more power than torsion. Crossbows, I guess, would all technically be like torsion or similar, right? Yeah. So could you make like a counterweight crossbow?
Maybe. There's a...
or like a counterweight ballista?
One of the earliest forms of catapult or trebuchet, like this is the actual thing that has a trebuchet. There's one of them that's set up pointed at a castle. It's like this museum in the UK. And it's great. So... you load it on one end, and then you have your crew of guys grab a rope, they jump, grab a rope, and fall.
So it's a counterweight, technically.
Yeah, there's a counterweight catapult that you have like 4 guys basically launch by jumping up and pulling the rope.
I'm just thinking like, okay, so Renaissance, 1500s. Yeah. And then since the Renaissance, we've had this endless explosion of technological growth. Oh, yeah. But it almost seems like maybe we've had growth since the Roman times.
So, Sargon released a video on Losiers recently, which was very interesting. He went to a church in, I can't remember where the church is, but it's like one of the great English abbeys. And it has English heroes buried there. And it's really cool. You go into this place, and it's this massive open room, like the columns, not buttresses, I can't remember what these columns are called. And it's got the stained windows. And it's got these raised stone platforms and carvings of the dead guys there.
Yeah, we've been to one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of them is this guy has chainmail. And you see his very simple chainmail, and he's holding his sword, and he's lying there. And he's got simple helmet. You go to the next guy, and he's got plate. And it's like just a breastplate, very simple armor. Then a third one, the guy's got full Gothic plate, and it looks amazing. And these guys are hundreds of years apart of when they fought and died. And it's like massive leaps in each technology just for their armor.
But it does...
like the 16th century armor is like, that's some of the bare armor you can get at 16th.
There is still the question though, like, what's the difference between Augustus Caesar's Romans and between the Romans of King Arthur's day? Like, what were the Romans doing? Nothing?
Well... so that's interesting. You know, The oversimplified history. Not oversimplified. The guy had the Punic Wars.
Yeah, I think that's oversimplified.
Okay, and you know how he has his Romans, and they've got those silly little feathers sticking out of their hats, like the 3 feathers, and they've got like that armor and appearance, and they developed that trireme technology of like the slam down. And you look at Asterix and Obelix, and their Roman legionnaires look so different than the oversimplified.
That's 500 years later. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a change in technology and how they kitted themselves out and the gear they wore. So that's like one of the changes there.
I wonder if they were different in Attila's time. Because you look at the Byzantines, right?
Yeah.
And
well, yeah, you jump for another 500 years. Byzantines, they're really different.
They had like Greek fire. No, you don't even have 300 years.
Sorry,
You have the Greek fire. But
and cataphracts.
Yeah, and so the Byzantines were obviously continually advancing. So it seems unlikely that from 0 to 500 there'd be no advancement.
No.
Now, I do wonder, there's 3 events, which might be responsible for the Dark Ages being this weird stagnant time, if it was stagnant at all.
Yeah.
Or at least, if not stagnant, sort of like, okay, Poland just lost all knowledge of mathematics. Yeah. It's going to take another 50 years for Italian mathematics to trickle down into Poland because Poland just lost it. And so I think, okay, so first you have Attila, because I think he could have actually caused the Dark Ages, right? Yeah. Like, this is a man with like 100,000 troops just ready to go anywhere, anytime.
Him and the boys going out for a lark.
Yeah. But this isn't an army of 100,000. You know, you've got your wagons and your camp followers and this is just 100,000 of the world's best warriors that can go anywhere, anytime without a baggage train.
Yeah.
Like, it's the perfect army, basically. And it was probably the perfect army until like the American Civil War, when like machine guns were invented.
Like the Romans? Because the thing about the Romans, which I just love, like the later Romans, like Caesar's Romans, is so like...
Attila was after Caesar.
Okay, so Attila... Yeah, the Romans had kind of gone screwed up after that point. Sorry, the Romans did. But so Attila's, they could go anywhere. What the Romans did is they brought civilization with their army. Like, they would go forward, they build the road behind them.
No, the Romans could not handle horse archers at all.
No.
And that's what Attila's army was. Because the Romans didn't have to... The only way to defeat a horse archer is to shoot them.
Yeah.
Because you can't get close.
Have archers.
But you need archers that have... Well, you need archers that have slightly better range, really.
Yes, you need yeomen from Britain.
Well, they... that's... I was going to get to that, but I think... I'll get to it in a moment. So... The Romans tried having their own horse archers, because you give a man a bow, you stick him on a horse, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard to shoot from a horse.
Yes.
It's not something that you need to be born in the saddle in order to, with a bow in your hand, in order to do this. And so the Romans, their horse archers didn't work. You can't throw a javelin far enough, so the pilums didn't work. Their siege engines probably would have been their best bet, but you don't use siege engines on soldiers. You use those on fortifications and as a morale thing. And you have to, okay, this army has siege engines. Let's not fight them. We'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because you're this horse archer army. So
you have to do what the Chinese did. Build a giant wall.
Yeah, fortify everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, okay, the city has great big walls. Then we'll just attack your farms. You go to your farms, now we attack your city.
Yeah, we'll just attack your farm. China. All right, we'll just go... What?
How big is this thing?
That far side come from? Yeah. Where did that come from? But that's actually very accurate of, like, you can't see China.
Just this wall. Okay, well, we'll just go around the wall. How big is this thing? I actually wonder... I don't know anything about the building of the wall. I know it was pretty quick, but was there, like, nomadic tribes at the time going, like, we got to stop this?
Good luck, there's an army.
Yeah, but the army can't be everywhere at once, right?
Yeah, but it's where it's getting built.
Yeah. And
if you try to attack where it's being built...
Yeah,
China had a lot of the mountain tribes as their allies.
So the only way to... the only way to defeat a horse archer is to have accurate ranged troops that have an equal or greater range than the horse archers, and probably greater because the horse archers are faster than most ranged troops. And so you need guns. You need accurate guns to do that. And accurate guns don't happen until the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
And mass producing them as well. So probably before Napoleonic Wars, you could give a bunch of people some like muskets and they would help.
Yeah.
But each person would only be about the equivalent of a horse archer. Maybe worse because they're going to be shooting much slower than a horse archer. And yeah, so the only people I think on Earth that could possibly have defeated the horse archers would be the Britons.
Yeah.
And maybe, okay, actually not the only people. Possibly the Incas.
Yeah, with their slings.
But on the other hand, the Incas
were beaten by the conquistadors.
They're beaten by like 50 horse archers, essentially, with the conquistadors. So they seem to not have... Like, Europeans, if you look at their history, it's one of the bloodiest places on Earth. It's very, very violent. There's a lot of people in a very small space. They're hardcore in Europe. And the Inca don't appear to be hardcore. Or they have a very weird concept of battle. They have, like, honor and all sorts of weird stuff. Well, Europeans had honor for a while, but that slowly eroded. Because the Romans didn't really have much honor.
No.
Especially once they became the Byzantines. They kind of threw honor out. And so Europe wasn't very honorable after a while. But and even at the time of Attila was around, longbows weren't really a thing.
No.
Like, so I don't think back then the British would have been able to defeat them.
Well, I feel like if the Mongols had tried to go into the UK, like, they could have probably conquered everything the Romans had conquered. Then they end up in the Highlands. And then the Mongols would have to deal with the Highlanders. And I think, like, the way to beat the Highlanders is have them fight each other.
The Mongols weren't just horse archers.
Yeah.
They had Chinese technology. So the Mongols would have had cannons and rifles and...
Yeah, even with that, I think, like, how the Highlanders were beaten is they fought each other. Like, the British army at the time had pretty good technology, and they still utilized the technology of diplomacy to win. Because it's just such a mess in that whole area.
Yeah, so the three things. So you have Attila, he comes around, and he kind of ends one half of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Like, he conquers the Western Roman Empire. Yeah. And I think it was the Western. Yeah. So, and then he dies of a nosebleed because God thought he was cheating.
His wife might have murdered him.
The mods were like, cheating. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why would she murder him?
I don't know. But it's possible it was a murder. He got poisoned.
You know, he knew he would die young. He had a seer he went to, and he said, I want to know, will I be the ruler of the greatest empire ever? And the seer said, no, you will die soon. But your son will be. And so that is well then. His son was not, by the way.
Kublai Khan could have been, but the idiot went back home.
Well, you're talking about the Mongols now.
Sorry, not the Mongols. Is Kublai Khan went back home?
Yeah. Yeah, Kublai Khan was a Mongol.
Oh, okay.
Attila was a Hun.
Sorry. What happened to Attila's son?
Probably got beaten up by the Romans. I don't know. But Attila died, and
if Attila had been Christian, it would have been different.
Could be. There was an account. You might know this, but Attila. We don't know where the Huns came from. Like, they just sort of appeared, and the Huns were talked to. Like, they had all sorts of conversations and meetings, and they're like, "Where are you from?" Like, here's a map. Where's your empire? It's like, we don't need to draw it on a map. Our empire is where our army is.
Were the Huns the collective of German barbarians that basically got kicked out by the Romans and became nomadic and then just flipped and...
Well, they were much more like... They're from the same region as the Mongols.
Okay.
They're steppe nomads. Okay. So they're Asians more.
So they're Golden Horde area.
Yeah, but way before the Golden Horde.
Yeah.
But so somewhere off in the east, basically. But Hungary was settled by them. Those are Hun descendants. And they it gets blurry, right? Where the like the Slavs and the Rus and the Norse end and the Asians begin, right?
Yes.
It gets kind of blurry there. Like, you look at the Khazar nomads. That's kind of a perfect example, right? There are these Russian, Chinese, Mongolians.
Yeah.
They're right in the middle of it all, and they look like they're right in the middle of it all.
And they act like it too.
So you have Attila come in. Maybe he knocked back society 500 years, and then Attila is defeated, or he dies, and then whatever happens, and then the Mongols come in like the year 1000 ish. I don't know exactly when the Mongols came, but it was around the year 1000, I think. And so the Mongols come in and they conquer everything, and then Genghis dies. His sons do a decent job, but the empire slowly falls over the next couple hundred years. And in that same time period, possibly because of the Mongols, you have the bubonic plague. Yeah. And so that's sort of 1-2 punch, which probably kicked people back quite a bit.
The bubonic plague was really weird, though, because it drastically changed society as well.
Yeah, it might have made the individual person's life better. But so there's the story from Babylon, right? Where, sorry, not Babylon, Baghdad. So there's the story from Baghdad where the Mongols conquer Baghdad. And then they kill everyone because Baghdad resisted. Because the Mongols had this deal. You surrender, you're good, you're in our empire now. Yeah. You don't surrender, we kill everyone in your city. And so it was very... They made it so they didn't have to fight, right? Yeah. But Baghdad said, we're going to fight, so they fought, and then they killed everyone. Baghdad, they had this problem where there were so many people to kill, they couldn't do it properly. So they basically said to the soldiers, all right, you have to kill 1,000 people each, just like get chopping. Like it was actually a logistical nightmare just to kill everyone in Baghdad. So they kill everyone, they throw their bodies in the river, they burn the city, they chuck all the books in the river. And it was said the river flowed black and red with ink and blood.
Yeah.
There's your dark age right there.
Yeah.
Like, that knowledge that, like, Baghdad was considered the capital of science on Earth at the time, right? And it is said that Baghdad hasn't recovered to this day from the Mongols.
Yeah.
And so, because Baghdad's still around, but yeah, it was the shining star of the world. And then the Mongols raided it, threw everything in the river. And so, what could have happened is there was a steady advance until the Mongols came along, and then they got knocked back like actually 1,000 years. And then what might have happened was the Renaissance period was actually just like it got truncated so that you go from like Augustus Caesar to the Renaissance because everything in the middle was destroyed by the Mongols.
There's this lovely, it's not lovely, it's kind of horrifying story as well, and this could have happened more than that. So there's this old, in one of the abbeys, I think in France or the UK. Anyways, there's a book that they're doing scans on to basically get all the knowledge down, and it was a copy of the Bible. In the scanning, they found a huge amount of mathematical equations.
Yeah, Archimedes, some of his writing was destroyed to make room for
Bibles.
For Bibles, religious texts.
Yeah, this wasn't Archimedes, this is some other mathematician's things, but like that sort of thing as well of like, this is a book. We'll just get out the whiteout, cover up how to make a spaceship, and we'll write down about how Jesus kicked out the tax collectors, yes.
Yeah. And there's also... It's actually really sad because we're kind of at the point now where we've... So there's the Indus River texts, which are still around. And there's texts in Nepal, I think, but I don't know how far back Nepal's history goes. There's probably more, maybe some African things. I don't know how many African groups did writing. I know there's some weird stuff in Africa, like string messages. Like you'd sort of like weave a cat's cradle as a thing.
That's kind of cool.
But, that's kind of
hard to convey 500 years of history by weaving some string.
Well, not necessarily. Like if each pattern is a letter, but your libraries could fall apart. Like they rot, right?
There's this funny moment in
or the dye fades.
Baron's Jury West, this anime about Elf.
Yeah.
Where she's talking about one of her most traumatic memories is a bunch of her favorite books fell apart. And it's because elves live so long, their lives outlast books. And so they look at books as like a temporary source of knowledge.
Well, they always have been. And actually, until very recently, there was so parchment lasts a really long time. Parchment is some of our best stuff that we have, right? Paper doesn't. And so, or it didn't used to. We had this period from, 1800s to like 1990, where those books were turning yellow and falling apart. And then in 1990, the formula for ink and paper changed so that it's not super acidic anymore. And so now books will, in theory, last way longer than they used to. We have all these people that could have told us about our past and what things were actually like, right? Like the Mayans, the Greeks, the Romans. But we have the fire of Alexandria. We have the sacking of Baghdad. We have the... if you go way back, we have Alexander sacking Babylon. Yeah. Babylon was this place of wealth and knowledge and amazing.
And if you go way, way back, you have... the king of Babylon sacking Jerusalem.
And Nebuchadnezzar?
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar the Great sacking Jerusalem.
And then you have, you go even further back, I think, and you have the Egyptians being destroyed by the Sea People.
Yeah.
And who knows what's lost from
Bronze Age collapse.
And so the Indus River texts might be our best bet at this point, but nobody knows the language. They're just these huge library of texts that we can't read, but those might not even, maybe that was Chandragupta this time, which was a long time ago, but it's not, it's not pre-Julius Caesar or something like that. I still, like, there's that stone, I don't know if it's fake or not, or a hoax, but in ancient Greeks carved on it, like, I don't know, give me an ancient Greek's name, Agamemnon, right? Yeah. Let's say Agamemnon can lift this over his head. And things like that can last. Things that are, like, the Egyptians were aware of that. They carved a lot of stuff in the walls of their temples itself. And so we have that, but we don't have...
we do have the Gilgamesh text.
Yeah.
Or cuneiform. We do have cuneiform.
We have parts of it. We don't have the whole thing, but we have bits of it here. We have the Enuma Elish, which is of Marduk and whatnot. And that's some of the oldest writing we have. But in that book I was reading on the Celtic mythology, something he pointed out was, if you read a book from now, right, and someone says, "Oh, thank God that bus came on time, because I don't know what I would have done otherwise," right? You take that text, you give it to someone 1,000 years from now or 2,000 years from now. That's the scale we're working with, right?
Yeah.
And they go, okay, we can translate all these words. Okay, so God we assume is a deity, right? But we don't know what aspects that deity had, or we don't know anything about the entire Christian faith. We just know that they have this being called God. We don't know what a bus is. We don't know why that would be good or bad if it came late or early. And because nobody's going to write about the book on, this is what a bus is. This is, like, those books do exist, but they're so common that all the texts, if the average, like, there is books about this is what God is, and there is books, this is what buses are, right? But if only 0.1% of writing survives, you're going to see a lot of references to buses and God, but you're not going to know what they are.
So Dark Age, medieval period, some of the best things we have for knowledge back then are letters people sent to each other, cookbooks, and diaries. Those are the things. Like, the letters are one of the biggest ones. Like, there's this group of historians that were talking about this whole historical period, and basically, like, 80% of their knowledge of this period is letters people are sending each other, and these are, like, unimportant letters.
But even then, there's so much that is just so obvious it's not in the letter. Like, how was the letter sent? Was it dangerous to travel with the letter? Okay, you're talking about your pigs. Is it normal to have pigs? What does a pig do? Is a pig a thing of worship, or is a pig a thing of food? Yeah. Is a pig a pet? Is it... There's... You don't know what all these things are. They might say, like, by Thor, I'm glad that... And it's like, okay, well, do you worship Thor? Is Thor a made-up person? Is Thor a historical person? What do you do with a Thor? So even those letters, they can tell you what kind of letters were being sent, but they don't... There's very few people that were sitting down and going, like, a thesaurus, right? Like, you want you want something like Aristotle's encyclopedia, where he actually sat down and he said, this is a horse, this is a unicorn, this is a basilisk, this is Atlantis, this is Greek. Like, he actually went and he described everything, and those things are invaluable.
Yeah, well, the Doomsday Book.
Well, that was... He wasn't saying like...
No, but he did tell us what everything was.
But
he told us where everything was.
But he wasn't saying like a carriage is a vehicle with four wheels and a spokes. And, like, so we don't... They say carriage. Maybe they're talking about rocket ships. We don't know.
Yeah.
We probably not, but we don't know.
Well, so earlier than Doomsday Book, so Alfred the Great, I don't know if he wrote histories, but he translated the Bible to Saxon. So he's one of the early translators, and he was big on knowledge, so we might have some stuff from him.
Well, he did the Doomsday Book.
No, that wasn't Alfred.
Yeah, that was. He did the survey of all the lands.
No, that wasn't Alfred the Great.
Yeah, it was.
No, that was William the Conqueror did the Doomsday Book.
That was Alfred, wasn't it?
No, William the Conqueror did the Doomsday Book.
Pretty sure it was Alfred.
No. So after William the Conqueror took over England, he wanted to know all the shit that he had acquired. And so he sent out surveyors to let him know what he'd gotten. And that was what the Doomsday Book was, that survey that was done.
I mean, you could say the same about Alfred, though, right? Like, he had 1/13 of Britain, and then he had the whole thing. It's like, okay, what do I do with all this? Like, they're just a bunch of Vikings. I gotta know what people's names are.
He converted the Vikings. He translated the Bible. That's what Alfred did. The Doomsday Book is William the Conqueror.
I think it was Alfred.
Now, we're not going to look this up.
No, there's no way to tell.
No. This is... I was watching Mythbusters, and early Mythbusters is early 2000s, like early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s.
And it went into like the mid-noughties, I think. 2010s and up.
Okay.
Anyway, so Mythbusters, they're given an internet rumor. They're given a rumor, like a story that's told or a myth, and they test it. And one of the things about it is, after a certain point, yeah, you could have gone online, confirmed it, and checked it, but they were just like testing things and taking these rumors and looking at the different things and just gathering this knowledge and trying it for themselves from these different things. And like today, Mythbusters is sort of like, well, I'll look that up online, I don't have to do it. But before, it's like, okay, I have to catch this Mythbusters episode. I have to watch this episode. And then you watch that episode and then someone says a fact. And you're like, no, I saw in the Mythbusters this is actually the case. Like, if you drop a penny from the Empire State Building, it won't kill someone. It doesn't even have enough energy in it to, like, bruise someone's head.
I saw a video where a guy tried to disprove that, actually. He didn't agree with the Mythbusters results.
They fired a penny at over 3 times the speed of sound, and it still didn't deal significant damage.
So his problem was that the entire premise or the entire argument the Mythbusters made is based upon the fact that a penny... They couldn't have fired a penny 3 times the speed of sound to do that.
No, they did.
Okay.
They fired it with an air gun.
Right. Well. Anyways,
they fired it with a gun.
His point was that the terminal velocity of a coin is such that it's not going to hurt you, basically, right?
Yes.
And that was the Mythbusters' conclusion. But he said you can overcome the terminal velocity if you create a sort of wind tunnel, and you can create a wind tunnel if you spin the coin. And on top of that, they were using a penny, and he's an Australian, and Australians have the biggest coins on Earth, and so he was saying, so I bet if you threw this thing as hard as you could and put a nice spin on it...
So they actually went further than that, though, because they're Mythbusters. They had a modified rifle that you could load a penny into the end of, and it fired at like 3 times the speed of sound, and it broke the skin on the skull thing they had, but it didn't damage the bone.
But what's the range? Because if you have a flat face, after like 10 feet, it's going to lose all its force, right? But if you stick your head against the muzzle...
it was like a range of this. It hit at 3 times the speed of sound.
And if it's hitting on the edge, you're imparting a lot more force, and
I think it did hit on the edge.
But you couldn't fire it on the edge, though, because you wouldn't have a way to push it, right?
No, Adam made a gun that pushed it to fire on the edge. It was a terrifying weapon. Jamie thought it was going to explode and, like, injure someone. Anyways, see, this kind of argument is great, though.
Okay.
Of just, like, the myth, like, you can't look up as this... You don't have the nebulous internet to go and prove your fact.
Okay, but then...
You can have conjecture and...
How did William the Conqueror conquer these people to make your so-called Doomsday Book if his penny rifles couldn't overcome...
He didn't have
the sound barrier.
Do we have to go get out an encyclopedia?
Okay, but what was your point? So, you're saying the Mythbusters, you used to have to watch the show.
Well, it's not even you have to watch the show. It's just you didn't have let's Google it, let's go to the internet to find it. You actually discussed it and you could talk about it logically and maybe not come to a conclusion.
Do you mean the modern Mythbusters, they just sit in a room and they look stuff up? Is that what you're saying?
That's what we do. Like, we just, like someone says a fact or says a thing. And it's like, no, I disagree with it, and here's this paper, and here's this reason why I looked them up, and they couldn't be biased or whatever, but you have to have a proof and a reason to every single thing, and you can gather all this information, so you have to use it. And because you have access to all of it, if you don't say something without the backup of it, then what you say is worthless.
Okay, so where do the Mythbusters come into it?
That back then, it was, I saw this on the Mythbusters, I watched the Mythbusters, they tested these rumors, and it's like a time period sort of like sub-internet where not all the information of the universe was on the internet.
No, it still isn't on the internet.
No. I'm confused where your confusion of where do they come into this is. I'm saying that they were one of the sources of knowledge as based on the whims of what rumor or myth they choose to cover. And you had to like catch that episode or have the CDs and you watch them.
Okay, what's your thesis here?
There's something charming about not looking it up and knowing it by going, oh, I found this internet source. There's something different to... Okay.
Restate it, but say what it is. There's something charming about not looking...
up information.
Okay, so altogether, there's something charming about not looking up information. And the Mythbusters...
No, that's it. There's something charming about not looking up information. And the Mythbusters is one of the proofs of that, of instead you'd watch in Mythbusters or you saw it on Mythbusters and someone else saw that episode.
You can't stop me and then continue.
Oh, no.
Can I try again?
No, I get infuriated by your, like, what's your thesis? No, there is no thesis or statement. Maybe there is very different. But the point is here that we had this disagreement about William the Conqueror and Alfred the Great. And we could look it up, but I'm saying we don't, because if we had looked up, we wouldn't have had this conversation. And this conversation, as infuriating as it is to me at the moment because of this layered trajectory, existed purely because we didn't look it up. That is lost by looking it up. So, potential conversation is lost by instant access to information. And sometimes these conversations are more worthwhile than the actual information, because we get to my...
So you've piled on so much, I forgot what your thesis was again.
Instant information stops you from having conversations that can be greater than the information in that instance.
And the Mythbusters exemplified that.
Yes.
That's what I tried to say before you interrupted me.
You're saying it wrong.
So, I want to say it so I remember it. Your thesis is that we shouldn't look up information because it's more interesting to have a conversation than just look something up online. And the Mythbusters exemplified that fact by showing how fun it was to just do some experiments rather than just look it up online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, condensed down into the essence.
Into something that isn't just an insane person's rambling. Okay, so you say there is no thesis. So thesis is your statement of what everything else is about, right? So if there is no thesis, then it is actually just insane rambling.
Yes, exactly. Now you understand me. So on my insane ramblings, anger. I learned something about anger recently. So I made a video where I went on a rant about my problems with Dragon's Dogma 2.
Yep.
And apparently, this has been going on with Capcom for ages. And Capcom fans will very quickly crawl out of the woodwork.
Do I have any silver here?
Why?
I want you to touch some silver, because either you or the last time's you was a mimic, because we're having the same conversations, and it's freaking...
No. I'm getting to that with the same conversation. I'm getting
because
to
the last time I said that looking stuff up online.
Yes, I know you did, and I stole your thing. That's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so you remember being there.
Yes.
Okay, so either you're a mimic line now, or you were a mimic.
I do have a necklace made out of silver. Well, it might be in this box.
Well, if you're... I was going to say if you're willing to look for it, then that proves you're probably not a mimic. But the fact that you couldn't find it means that maybe you're just a really clever mimic. Anyways, go on with Dragon's Dogma. You anger.
Yeah. So, I had just released that video, and I got one bad comment at that time.
Yeah.
So
you were attacked by a hate mob, and you had to leave your house.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, the video got watched by a lot of people, and a lot of people wrote comments, and it sort of came to me, several conclusions came to me. One of them is that Capcom's been doing this sort of practice for a long time, and that Capcom fans are aware of this, and they've completely excused it. But what I came to realize is...
Microtransactions are actually good.
No, my anger...
Thank you, EA.
...was pointless. And the tool that is anger... My anger was pointless to show in that way, of being angry and expressing it and having, like, rage. You know, Az from Heel vs. Babyface, where he had that whole...
He's the baby man that...
the pronouns that, like...
Rant about pronouns?
Yeah, and people are making fun of him for...
I said baby man not as an insult. I haven't watched any of his videos. Yeah. I've just seen a thumbnail of him screaming.
Yeah.
And he looks like a giant baby.
Yes.
I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just he's bald, he's got a smooth face.
Yes. Like... No, that's why he's called Heels versus Babyface. He has a baby face.
Oh, okay.
But he had this anger, and people were laughing at that anger. So you're a British soldier, okay? And you've landed on New Zealand.
Okay.
And so you're there with your rifle. I think they had rifles at that point when they're colonizing it.
Okay.
And a bunch of Maori warriors show up, and they start hockeying at you.
Maori or Moriari?
The Haka guys.
The Maori, okay.
Yeah, Maori.
Because the Moriari were quite peaceful. That'd be easy to subjugate.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Maori
are
hockeying at you.
Okay.
And they're making these angry expressions.
Yeah.
And so, but you're of the British Empire.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, savages! Pip, pip, tally-ho, lads, and you fire at them.
Okay.
Now, part of this is, oh, look at these savages trying to be scary and getting all angry at us. We're so much better than them. Ha, ha, ha. And you have this smugness, and you use it to dismiss the anger. Now, the Maori back up that anger by stabbing you.
Yeah.
They have this inherent violence.
So we need to stab Capcom?
No.
Oh.
So, but if you could say that the Haka, let's say someone's hockeying at you, and you know they're bluffing, they're not actually going to attack you. That's a rather silly display, isn't it? Because there's no inherent violence anymore. Like someone a modern Maori is hockeying at you.
Yeah.
And they're not going to attack you. We live in society. There's not going to be violence there. Even then they're in person, so it's a little scary. But someone expresses anger, there's a very high chance in person that they will attack you afterwards. And the anger is showing the size of your antlers, partly. It's showing the threat of your convictions. You're loud, you're scary. If the guy is 6'5" and his face goes red and he gets angry at you, it's scary and you might back down. Or you might call his bluff, or you might accept his challenge. When it comes to the internet, the person can never back up their anger with violence. Because they can never back up their anger with violence, it's always a bluff, or it's always someone who is showing they're scary but really isn't. And so you can be superior to them, and you can be smug about they're getting angry and there's nothing they can do about it. And so anger, when expressed online, is just a thing of derision because there's nothing that you can do about it. They can't punch you in the face.
Oh man, I wish I could remember it exactly, but there's this fascinating philosophical discussion about the transition from an...
Anyways, I want to learn how to hack people's computers to make them explode, but...
There's the transition from an honor culture to a liberal culture, in a rationalist culture, where in a rationalist culture, people being angry means that they are wrong. And so it's a way to dismiss someone because they couldn't logic their way out of a problem. Whereas in an honor culture, you would have people more, I am angry, therefore I am right. And so it's actually a new form of mockery founded upon culture we have now. But I also don't think about... I think about anger in a different way, actually. Where anger is the next best thing to nihilism. Anger is a feeling of powerlessness. And it's the alternative to despair. So it's better than despair. It's saying, I need to do something about this. And it's giving you the energy to do something. And so instead of it being a way to scare someone or convince someone else, it's a way to pump yourself up. It's not about, I will use my anger to influence the world. It's, I will use my anger to give me the motivation to do something.
Maybe rage is a better term of expressing rage?
No, I don't think... I think that it's basically the same ideas, but I don't think you should use your emotions to dominate others. I think if you want to scare people, because I think anger is just kind of, you seem like a baby no matter what. Like, if someone's really angry at me, I'm scared for my safety, but I'm not scared of their anger. I'm scared because they're insane, right? Like, I'm scared because they're unstable. It's not because they are angry. When people get angry, I think, typically, it's more of a catharsis for those who are in agreement with them to say, like, oh yeah, I'm on your side. Because if you're making a video online, right, you are not going to cow anyone with anger, right? Like, nobody is going to watch your video and be like, oh, he's angry. I better do what he says. This, like you said,
I can't do that reason. No one's
like you said, they can't stab you. But if you are angry, people who agree with you say, this is an issue that this person...
Well, I found that too with a few of the comments. Some people were like that.
This is an issue that the person cares about so much that they're furious and they feel powerless to do anything about it. And that gets the people who are on your base to be like, yeah, our anger is righteous because even our leader is angry.
Yeah, so I do agree with the anger is righteous thing, but I think the actual there is still the domination thing. Not so much like, I'm not saying people are trying to dominate other people when they're angry, but people can still see that and then do the smug, oh, look at, he's failing to dominate us, he's a baby.
Yes.
Like, so recently, Games Workshop did a thing with custodies, which a lot of fans disagree with. And one side's people saying, okay, I'll never buy this product again. I'm actually really annoyed at Games Workshop. It's like, okay, they seem to be doing slightly better with the fans. Like, they're letting fan animations come back. They're not being quite as scummy. Maybe I might start buying Games Workshop stuff again, and then they do this. And it's like, man, can never buy their product.
Yeah, but going on to the point.
So there's people saying I won't buy this anymore. There's people angry about it. There's people expressing their grief that this has happened. And there's the other side of these smug shits basically going, haha, we took the thing you loved away from you and you'll never get it back. Look at them crying online. Oh, look at these people getting angry. Look at these babies. And it's like this nauseating smugness.
Yeah, there's two issues there, right? There's the people laughing at those who are angry, but then there's the people... I'll start from where I'm coming from, right? Your anger trying to change the world is what a toddler does when they don't get their way, right? Like that is what that is. That's the toddler saying the world isn't going according to my script. I am furious. And that's narcissist. That's what a narcissist does, right? That's like the whole, like, how dare the world not conform to me type thing, right? Like, I will change the world with the force of my anger, because people will see they don't want to see me angry, and therefore the world will bend to my will.
I think there's saying something in anger, and you're angry and you can't contain it, but you're not saying it to dominate. It's just, well, you're saying it, you're angry.
Well, I think there's a different anger. So you look at famous example of Greta Thunberg, her "How dare you" speech, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's a narcissistic anger. Maybe it's overblown, maybe it's overly dramatic, but she isn't... Well, she is kind of trying to use her anger to control the world, right? But she is more furious. Well, okay, if we take her at her face value, right? And, I think we probably can. Whether we can take her parents at the value, that's a different question. But she is furious at these people, and all she can offer is impotent rage, right? All she can say is, how dare you? She's basically saying, you are a mean, miserable worm, right? Like, she doesn't have the insults in the moment, but she's basically saying, you are subhuman scum. And how dare you? And so her anger is at, I don't know, like, okay, so let's say the anger is at her affront to her sensibilities, but then are your sensibilities not just your script for the world? And wouldn't that then be, by my previous definition, a narcissistic rage? Because I also don't think you should be able to dismiss things just because people get angry. But I think, okay, you shouldn't use your anger... Okay, don't use your anger as a hammer. Use it as the strength to swing the hammer. Yes,
and that's... I'd never make a video like the one I did, where I was angry while doing it, and I sounded angry.
So you could have been you could have made the video because you were angry.
Yeah, but I could have... What I could have done, which would be better, especially within how the online environment works, is make something that's mocking.
Or you could have you could have even...
Or just done calmly, or...
No, I think even if you get angry in the video, as long as your anger isn't the tool to bring about change, rather the anger is driving the tool to bring about change.
Well, I think I partly did that, but even then, having the anger there...
Like, if you say something like, they put a paywall on fast travel, right? So you're clearly angry,
yes.
Right? But you aren't using your rage to change them. You are actually pointing out your problem. And so I think you can be angry even in the video.
Yeah.
But the anger can't be. This is all hypothetical, right? But sorry, not hypothetical. This is all figuring it out. But if the anger is the tool to give you the energy rather than screaming at the sky because they did this, right? Rather than you go like, I can't believe they did this. Why did they do this? 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 No, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. That's anger. That's anger being used as the weapon, right?
Yeah.
But you want the anger to drive the weapon. You want the anger to be the strength that drives the weapon, and the weapon is
you want the anger to be the strength behind the sword, not the sword itself.
Yeah. And so your video, let's say, it was amazing. I watched it 10 times.
I don't know if you watched it at all.
So moving on. So let's say in your video, you're going something like, they paywalled fast travel. They paywalled changing your character's appearance. They paywalled horse armor. I don't know. And then what's next? They paywall our daughters and our children. Daughters are your children. They paywall our wives and our children. Then that's your sword is your logic. Sort of. I mean, daughters and children. But, whereas if you go, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair.
So if we go back to they paywall or like that, you have the anger there.
Yeah.
And then someone's like, why are you so angry, Bo? Haha, what a loser.
And then that comes into, and I really wish, like I said, that is a cultural spanning phenomenon that you get angry, therefore you lost.
Yeah. And that's where I was coming from with the violence behind it, is there's...
And what that might be, that might actually be because anger is used as the weapon so often.
Yeah.
And the correct response to that is, hey, why are you so angry, right? In a way, that is the correct response. Although, that said, if someone is using anger as a weapon, and you are next to them, don't mock them, just get out of there.
Yes.
Because even if they're a decent person, their mind's gone while they're... Because the fact that you're using anger as a weapon at all means you've lost your mind.
Yeah.
And it can happen to anyone, right? Like, it's... Or there's probably people who don't do that, but the people who... By the time they're doing that, their mind is lost. If they're doing that at all, their mind's lost. And a lot of people can get into that state. Not everyone does, but yeah. Like, I remember... I think I've talked about it before, right? When I gave away my... Well, I threw out my old pillow, and then I just had this... I was like 11 or 12, and I just had this temper tantrum all night long of like, I want my old pillow back. Why did I throw it out? Because it wasn't fair. I wanted the world to change, and it's like...
Yeah.
It's horrible. I wish I knew a better word than pathetic, because pathetic means worthy of pity, right? And it wasn't pathetic. It was... Childish, miserable. Well, a child would know better, right? Like, this was like toddlerish. I was an idiot. I think that's the word, right? No, I'm not idiot. Stupid? There's a word that actually means like a toddler. No, there's a word that actually means like a toddler, and it's like stupid or something. Huh. And it just changed into a general insult. But
okay.
Yeah, repugnant definitely works. Narcissistic works. That is where, with that last psychiatrist, the blog guy, who I have a slight, maybe not a disagreement, but I question his notion of saying people act narcissistically on and off. Like, it is a very hopeful message in many ways, right? And saying everyone's narcissistic is also a way of saying, hey, check yourself, right? But if you do that, does it become a useful term at that point? Because you're basically making narcissism an emotion. And then I guess you could say the personality disorder. You have to say, like, narcissistic personality disorder, right?
Yeah.
So you have...
Like anger management.
Yeah, so you have... So you can have... Everyone can have narcissistic moments. Everyone can have angry moments.
Yeah.
But not everyone has APD. Not everyone has NPD.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's the way to look at it. Yes, okay. I can work with that, I guess. And it could also...
Well, what's the dark tetrad?
Well, I know what it is, but Machiavellianism, psychopathy, psychopathy and narcissism.
And Machiavellianism?
Yeah, Machiavellianism. Yeah.
There's a fourth one that's been added. There's one that's been added. That's why it's the tetrad, not triad anymore.
Oh,
Steve.
Womanism? No, sorry, that was...
So what are the three you know? It's,
why did I say that?
Machiavellianism.
That wasn't even a joke. That was just like a lame attempt to be edgy, and not even a good one. Like, I could have at least said, like, I don't know. Well, it'd get us banned, but...
So, Machiavellianism, Machiavellianism,
narcissism, and psychopathy.
I think, like, the final one is actually, like, malice, like, wanting to inflict pain. I think that's the final one, like, actually wanting to see hurt done.
Sadism?
Yeah, sadism. Okay. That's the fourth one, is sadism.
No, I never learned about this dark triad or tetrad in psychology, and I don't know... Apparently it's part of personality psychology, I guess, apparently. But, or at least that's what Jordan Peterson seems to claim. But, like, psychopathy isn't even recognized in psychology. So, it's more of a... Or no, that's the wrong way to put it. They're not a monolith, psychologists, right? But the DSM is sort of the guidelines from which all stems. And psychopathy isn't part of the DSM. Or at least it wasn't, because it's now number 5, and I was taught on number 4. But there's a lot of psychologists like Hare and Peterson who work outside the DSM and talk about...
I think number 3 didn't have it, but number 4 has nice guy. Like, nice guy was added to it as a condition.
But that's basically just borderline, isn't it? I wonder how they define the difference.
So, back to the inherent violence has a difference. I was about
I guess it's a subcategory of borderline.
So if you get angry, you've lost.
I think it could also be a mockery of the old ways, right? Like, if you view... Who was talking about this? It's if you view progress as eternally forward, right? Yeah. Then anything we leave behind must be bad. And if we left behind honor... the honor culture of the Romans. Yeah. Therefore, if you feel your honor is impinged upon, then you're being a barbarian, therefore you're stupid, therefore you're wrong, because your morals are old morals, and old morals are bad.
So on that, is demanding satisfaction narcissistic?
Depends how you look at it. If you, as the demander of satisfaction, need it, then I think it would be narcissistic. However, if your demand for satisfaction is saying, I am giving you a chance to make up for your wrongs, then I don't think it is. Like, it's a sort of...
and then if you go, well, I don't see I did anything wrong, then it is decided by our fight?
Then the satisfaction has been met with the fight, I think. Yeah, whether you win or lose, I think.
Yeah.
So, now, I might be taking your idea too far here, but let's say I don't know, I'm in a black neighborhood in the States with a lot of history, and I say the N-word, and someone says, you want to take that back to me, right? That is him demanding satisfaction.
Yeah.
And then he is not saying, like, he's not being a narcissist. He's saying, you have insulted me, but I'm giving you this chance to make up for this insult. And now I do not have to go along with that. It might lead to violence, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Okay, let's say I believed in saying the N-word in that situation, right? Let's say I stood by it. I think then I shouldn't take it back. But it gets weird because then, let's say it obviously leads to violence. Is it necessary to... Because you want to say you want to stand by what you believe in, even if it leads to violence, right?
Yeah.
But I also think of the sort of Chinese saying, which it has like...
Don't fight on your enemy's ground.
No, it's like, don't fight your foe unless you can beat them.
Yeah.
Or however it goes. You know, the whole like...
When you're strong... No, that's a different lesson.
No, but it's the idea of like, do not have a revolution unless you can win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And...
Well, otherwise you're just terrorists.
But there is something there. Like, it seems cowardly in a way, but... And maybe it is just me being a coward. But if I do think, oh yeah, whoa, sorry, I didn't realize that. Then I said, but now he should be willing to fight as well, right? He should be willing to say, he should be willing to accept me saying I'm not sorry.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean his acceptance doesn't mean he has to let me go. His acceptance could mean he comes and beats me or kills me. But the world does not conform to what he wants. Because what I was thinking about this. If you go to someone and you say, you hurt me because of this, this, and this, what you're actually saying is, please undo your action because that doesn't conform with the way I want the world to be. Which is different from saying, what you said hurts me.
Stop it.
No. Just to let you know. Because you don't get to control the other person, right? Now, if you continue, I'm out.
Yeah.
But I'm not telling you to stop it. I'm telling you this hurt me. But of course, it gets very complicated in the weeds because
I think
you can use your presence or acceptance as a weapon when it shouldn't be at all. You should never like that. That's why they say with a marriage, never threaten divorce for something, because you can say, look, you need to clean up your socks in this room, right? You're in a marriage with someone, you're like, I need you to clean up your socks. And they don't do it, you're like, hey, I divorced, right? And then it's like, well, we couldn't fix it. It's like, well, this was important. And maybe even say to them, this is super important. Like, please, I need you to do this. But, okay, I don't want to give marriage advice, but I believe it's something like, you do not say to them, clean up your socks or I'm leaving. Because then you've made it conditional, and therefore you're actually using your marriage status as a weapon, and then you can use it whenever you want.
Yeah.
And so then you go like, change the channel on the TV or I'm divorcing you.
Yeah.
Massage my feet or I'm divorcing you. And then it becomes a weapon. And then your relationship is at gunpoint.
Yes.
But
that old joke of the newlyweds. They've been married for 50 years. And a reporter comes to the wife, how have you been married to your husband so long? Divorce rate's up. And she says, oh, well, when we were just married, we went on this lovely honeymoon and we were riding donkeys. And we're on this donkey and we're going along. And the donkey that my husband was riding stumbled. And I went, that's once. And we kept riding along. And the donkey stumbled again. And he said, that's twice. And we kept going. And the donkey stumbled a third time. And he took out his revolver and shot him in the head. And I just went to him, what are you doing? Why did you kill that poor beast? And he held his finger to me and said, that's once.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't want that to be your relationship.
Yeah.
Probably. Because the husband... Okay, I'm going to defend the husband for a moment in that story.
Okay.
He didn't say, now you could say it's about complaining about the donkey, but we clearly know it's not about complaining about the donkey. It's bigger than that, right?
Yeah.
So actually, he is setting a healthy boundary in a way, because what he's saying is,
this is my system of dealing with the world.
Well, it's like he's not saying, like, if he had said to her, "You disagree with me, I will shoot you." That's an unhealthy boundary, right? Because that's him, relationship at gunpoint. But instead, he's just saying, this is the man I am. I don't tolerate annoyances. Yeah. You don't have to be near me. Like, she could have divorced him at that point. He's not going to shoot her for divorcing her at that point, right? So, theoretically. So, he's actually just saying, because what a boundary should be is you going, okay, it's hard to see the metaphysical, so you can't actually see my soul. But this is who I am. That's what a boundary is. It's a way of showing that more than the material realm. It's saying, this is who I am. Like, it's like a boundary is a bear showing you a video of a bear tearing apart a person that got too close to them. You go, oh, don't get close to bears. But if the bear says, I'll tear you apart unless you give me that food, then that is now not a boundary. That's blackmail.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing of turn the TV or I'll divorce you. That's blackmail. But you going, I don't tolerate people that don't change the channel around me when I ask them to. That's not a boundary. That's just who you are. Now, that makes you a jerk. Maybe nobody wants to be around. But if that's who you are, that's who you are.
Yeah. And you might find that there's no one around you if that's the way you are. And then maybe you have to change. Maybe you don't.
I think if that's who you are, that's who you are. Like, that boundaries should not be made about passing dalliances, right? Like, they are who you are.
Yeah.
I think. Now, like you said, you can change, though, of course. But
you might find that you don't like who you are.
Yes, but I don't think you should change who you... You shouldn't lie about who you are just to have people be around you, right? I don't think that's... It's tricky because that's letting your ego die in a way, right? Like, and maybe that's a good thing. But I do...
I think you're allowed to try to change who you are, and some people might say that you're lying to yourself. Like, the whole thing of the criminal... Like, you have a movie, right? And you have the criminal, and it's like... And he's gone good. He's gone clean. He doesn't commit crimes. But is that who you really are? You just put on a mask, and you're faking. You're lying to yourself. And the guy's like, no, I changed. I'm a good person now. It's that sort of thing of... And some people might see it as a lie. And some people might see it as them lying to themselves to be that person. Some people might change, actually.
So, yeah, but what's the reason for changing? Do you think that matters? Like, if your reason is so that I can get people around me, or if your reason is because I realize that is right and that is wrong.
Yeah, I think I think things can happen which make you realize that you're right or wrong. Such as, if everyone around you is dying because of your actions, then
you should at least look at them. I don't think that means you should change them. I think it means you should look at them.
Yeah, you can. That's the catalyst to look, and then you go, oh, that's not great.
So with the TV guy, right? Everyone leaves him, and he goes, man, there's no one around me anymore. Is that really who am I the person at my heart that needs other people to change the TV channel when I say so? And I think if the answer is yes, they shouldn't change, right?
Yes, all right. I need a live-in slave.
Yeah, figure it out. If that's who you are. But if you go, no, who I am is someone that likes having people around. Secondary to that is the changing.
Yeah.
Maybe, but it gets tricky because I really don't like you should be willing to change. You should, let your ego die and be reborn. Reborn is very important in there. It's not, let your ego die, have no ego. No, you should have an ego.
Yeah.
You have to let it go for the smallest period of time possible.
Yeah.
Let it reform. It's a phoenix. But if you are just subsuming the core axiomatical foundation of yourself in order to gain some benefit, that's prostitution, right? Like that, and even there's probably some prostitutes that are better people than you. I mean, there's lots of prostitutes that are better people than you because some of them probably don't care that they're doing the prostitution. They're like, yeah, okay, it's fine.
Trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too.
Yeah, and do not sacrifice yourself. Like, people don't trade your principles in for anything. Money, friendship, love. Don't trade in your principles. Now you can question your
video game.
Now you can question your principles if your principles lead you to hardship and ruin every time. That might be a good reason to
reflect on it.
To question your principles. But sometimes what's this, you can do everything right and everything goes wrong anyways. Yeah. Sometimes you just get unlucky. Sometimes things suck and you have to go, no, this is right. And also, even if you reflect on it and you say, okay, wow, this is not working. What you can do then is you can go, okay, you know what my problem? Like, your solution doesn't have to be to abandon the principle. It can be to change your life in a way that makes your principle work for you. Like the guy looking for your live-in slave.
Yeah.
Move to Qatar. Or Canada soon.
I was thinking of it more in a fetish sense, that he's like gone to a fetish site. It's not actual slavery. Because slavery is kind of immoral. So it's more he's looking for a sub to his dong.
I mean,
like there's a slave on weekends. Do the slave on weekend things work?
No, okay, what's more immoral, right? Like an actual slave or some perverted sub-dom fetish thing where you enslave someone and you don't even do them the dignity of admitting that you have conquered them. And instead you pretend you both pretend it's because this is a way of expressing love and affection.
Ever read women's romance novels?
No.
So the
actually,
the Clockwork Princess story.
Have I? I don't think I have.
So the Clockwork story, it's a part of like the Shadowhunters.
Yeah.
The author wrote it afterwards, and it's very much it's a steamy,
like City of Glass.
Yeah, City of Glass.
Yeah.
So this is a Victorian-based story, and it's a young adult female romance novel. And when I read that, I didn't quite realize it. And I talked to our mom about it. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a female romance novel. I was like, this is what it's written? I think... And it wasn't even on the bad end. Like, apparently they can get a lot more so.
But I think I know the stereotype about female romance novels, right?
Well, it's Dracula, Wolfman.
Yeah, I haven't read them, but I have a vague idea of the stereotype. And I think what's going on there partly is that there is actually... Well, there's two things. First of all, you are not the character in the book. Therefore, it can... Like, I like reading The First Law. I think it's a great series. I would hate to be any character in that book.
You read Thomas Covenant.
Yeah, I've read... Well, I think The First Law is worse. But, I think The First Law, worse things happen to the people. I think Thomas Covenant's more depressing. But First Law comes close. First Law, like, most brutal torture scenes I've ever read, by far. I wouldn't want to be the one doing the torture or the one being tortured.
Yeah.
Right. But it's an interesting read. And so some rape fantasy or something, you can still say it's an interesting read, right?
And so the fetish is the fantasy of the thing. It's not real.
Right, but the moment you hire the slave...
Well, it might not even be hiring. It's just you're both doing it.
Right.
That's what the two of them are into.
But I think... Okay, have you seen... Do you know the picture where it shows... It's called The Myth of Consent. Have you seen that picture? Where it shows a man and a woman, and they're both saying, I consent, I consent. And then it shows Jesus.
I don't.
Saying, I don't. I think that's real. Like I think that you have to get Jesus's permission as well. And
only a missionary, and there's a sheet in between you with a hole, so you can't even look at each other.
I don't think that...
Is that the point you're going to, the old Victorian?
No, I think you're conflating, like, that was slavery. Like, those are... There's a wide range within there. And I think that if you are fetishizing slavery... Okay, even fetishizing slavery, I don't have a problem with.
Go on.
Put that in a clip book. The problem... I think I psyched myself out there. The problem becomes when you let that fetish become your life. I don't think that any... Okay, now, I've actually had arguments with myself about this.
Go on.
So, on the one hand, I think that you shouldn't let a single aspect of your life dominate your life, right? Like, you shouldn't say, okay, well, I'm really into being a sub, so I'm going to let someone command me around. It's like, that should be a very small aspect of your life. You shouldn't make that your life.
On weekends, that's what I said.
Even don't give away your weekends, you know, like maybe...
Well, it's only on weekends. It's not every weekend, but it's on weekends. That's what I meant by that. On weekends.
Maybe only on Christmas or something. But Christmas should be about Jesus and trees. But maybe you make...
Boxing Day.
Maybe you make your slavery day, right?
Yeah, Boxing Day.
You make your slavery day, and then that's your nice little slave day. But it being like you go out in public with a collar on, and you're letting one part of your life, you're letting your obsession rule your life. It's the same thing, like, well, it's the stereotype with like autistic people where they really like Sonic, so they wear a Sonic t-shirt and they have the Sonic ears and they have a little Sonic tail maybe they stick on. Does Sonic have a tail?
Focus.
Yeah.
He has a tiny little tail.
And you do that and you go, okay, you can't...
I only know this in passing. I'm not obsessed with Sonic. Right?
You can like Sonic. It's fine to like Sonic. But don't let Sonic rule your life, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a similar thing. And the more... But do I also think there's an immorality to this slavery relationship?
Well, so you don't let Sonic rule your life. So do you think that nuns and priests are morally bad?
Well, that's where I get into like a tattoo, right? Like you're altering your life to get this tattoo. You're making... You're putting your whole being on. I will change my whole being because I want this tattoo so badly. And it's the same thing with a haircut, right? You're letting fashion rule you so thoroughly that, right? So that's where my debate with myself comes in. And so, yeah, you have a nun and a priest. They devote themselves to God. I actually do think nuns and priests, especially nuns and monks, I do like the Buddhist sort of stance on it, where it's like, this is for the losers. This is for the people
who have nothing else, and so they go off to become...
Yeah, but not necessarily in a they're worthless scum. It's more of a, I am so broken, this is what I need to do. Because otherwise abandoning your life, and I think that is how the monks and nuns were in a way as well, right? But I think devoting your life to God...
Well, some of them are also not... Like, you have... Think about the sororitas in Warhammer, where, like, those women absolutely obsessed with them. Like, they are actually insane.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong reason to do it, right? Because giving your way of life to God, and... in doing so, you are rejecting the world he gave you to be in and be one of his people, right? Like, he wanted you to go out and be fruitful and multiply. And you are going directly against that order by being a monk or a nun.
Yeah.
Unless you're our ancestor. And then he did it all.
Yeah, well...
several times.
There's exceptions.
With many women.
There's exceptions to that case. Like, there's this show called Father Ted. And... so their archbishop, like the head of their parish, like the guy who's ruling over him, they get one over him by finding a lovely cassette of him embracing his children. And so it's fine. They send him this. Father Ted's sitting there. It's like, oh, I'm watching this. Ah, it's a great video. It's just a man with his child. Ah, yes, but that's Father so-and-so. When I see this video, it makes me happy.
So, but I also, so I wonder if I'm also, okay, you get a tattoo. Well, people did think tattoos were immoral for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like, from like the, I don't know what the time period would be, about the 40s to the 90s?
On the Tolkien, one of the Lord of the Rings Reddits, common things is a lot of people show off their tattoos of Tolkien stuff.
Yeah.
Like the broken sword or the dragon or whatever. And I always just think, ooh, I don't know if Tolkien would have liked to do it.
So Jefferson, I think it was, said, in matters of principle, always be true to yourself and always stand firm even if the whole world's against you.
Yeah.
In matters of fashion, go with the prevailing wisdom.
Yeah.
So I think...
Is a tattoo fashion?
It could be. Yeah, it could be. Like, if you're in a... I don't think it is exactly... Like, it's more of a way to stand out still,
Yeah.
right? But I think if... for example, like, it's not actually a tattoo, but the Indian henna dot on your forehead, right?
Yeah.
If everyone's getting one, Jefferson would say, get one.
Yeah.
Right. And so if everyone got a tattoo of, like... I don't know, one of those, like, beard tattoos that the First Nations do.
Yeah.
Although they're not permanent, typically. But, like, those beard tattoos. If everyone got one, then, yeah, you should get one. That would be sort of Jefferson's wisdom, I think. Though when it's permanent and fashion changes, that would get weird, right?
Yeah.
That's actually... Okay, I just had a funny thought. Fashion changes all the time, right? Like, you look at the 1700s, 1500s, 1200s, 90s, 80s... Like, it changes by the decade, and then it also changes by the century, and it changes by the millennia, right? And... for some reason, all the traditional, like the First Nations and the Japanese and whatnot, is like, here's our traditional garb. It's like, yeah, was that the traditional garb of 1276 or the traditional garb of 1440?
Yeah.
It's like that wasn't allowed to change. It's like, you gotta move with the times. I want to see the new First Nation traditional garb.
You want to see a neo-Japanese traditional kimono?
Yeah, and I want to see a cyber headdress for a cyber Sue. Like, where's the Lakota face paint of 2024?
Yeah.
It's got, like, marijuana leaves on their cheeks or something.
It's those, those people who, like, dress like flappers.
Yeah.
Except it's the whole society that does it on New Year's.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, if you think about it. But that's what the First Nations and the Japanese and everyone else are doing.
No, that's what I was saying.
But on the other hand... if you do it for New Year's, it's kind of fun, right? Like, if you do it for Halloween, everyone dresses up in their old-timey English outfit. That's fun. Yeah. Thanksgiving, you all wear, like, the pilgrim gear if you're American. That's fun. So I think it's, for a ceremony. But the ceremonies are... you have to admit that the ceremonies are historical reenactments. They're not getting in touch with your roots, because your roots should be changing. Well, I guess your roots shouldn't... well, no, your roots grow, but your stems should be shooting out from the roots.
Yeah.
Move your culture forward. What do you guys do now? Mm-hmm. What is the modern First Nation? What is the modern...
the modern Japanese is suits.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chinese as well. China, big step backwards. I think the best men's fashion on earth is the Chinese tongzo, the suits that are tied rather than buttoned that the Chinese had until...
those things, yeah.
Until very recently. Like, they kind of go straight down in a cylinder.
Yeah.
And they've got, like...
it's hard to be overweight and wear one of those.
Yeah, but they look so good. Like, even like in Ip Man, he wears one, right? And like he's like fighting people in this like robe, and he looks awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the short ones, like, it doesn't have to be the full body down to the ankle, just like down to the hips or something, you know? Like, they look cool. They look really cool. But I think there might also be a moral aspect and a transient aspect. So it's like, okay, if this is part of the culture, then you let it subsume you. So a tattoo. I'm against tattoos personally, not because... I think they look kind of ugly.
See, my opinion on tattoos is formed over time. One is I just didn't like them to start with. But it's like, okay, they can have cool images, but then my thought is like, it's kind of just like a random piece of art on you. Now my thought is, you have to basically like do woad tattoos, or I don't like it. Like, if I was to get a tattoo, it wouldn't be like, oh, it's an image of some cat. It's like, no, I would be getting like woadic runes across...
or like the tribal tattoos, yeah.
Yeah, well, like... they emphasize parts of the body, like it goes around the bicep, or like, you know, the marriage band thing, like a full wristband that's not some picture.
People say, you should... some people say just get a tattoo if it looks good or if you like it. Some people say it should have meaning. I personally think...
Here's mine, is it needs to be aesthetically matching to the human form, and that's why I say woady.
My biggest problem with tattoos, if you get one that has meaning, it's kind of like, if you... every time you meet someone, you go like, I like trains. It's like, Okay, I didn't need to know that just yet. If I get to know you, then I'll know what's important. You don't have to show it to me.
But you met them in a gaming shop.
Or if they have like a, like if they have a pin on them. It's like, ask me about pins or whatever. It's like, I don't need to know that you're into pins, right? Yeah. Maybe if you're the pin expert, then that's kind of interesting. But I don't need to. But more than that for me, it's, I think it's good if people can get naked. And you can't get naked with a tattoo. That's sort of my take on tattoo. Maybe it's a weird one, but I think you can't be naked with a tattoo. And
you'd be naked with woading?
Well, if you can wash it off, sure.
But not permanent?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be for it, personally, I think. Even the aesthetic. Like, I think the aesthetic would look cool, potentially, but it's still, you can't be naked. Because it is an effect you're going for, right? Yeah. But then, again, so is a piercing, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't like piercings.
So. But with tattoos... It's very much a me preference, right? Yeah. So, like, I prefer, I don't know, a blonde hair. I think it looks better, right?
All right.
I'm not helping. Anyways. And I'm not a big fan of, like, brown eyes. I like lighter colored eyes,
Yeah.
And people from the sort of Persian region, the Aryans, no. No, but that doesn't mean I want everyone to be blonde. Yeah. It's just, this is my preference. So with tattoos, it's like, you get a tattoo, that's fine. I find you less attractive with a tattoo, but you're cool, get a tattoo. Yeah. It's like, I don't care if people get tattoos. It just makes them less appealing to me. But there's, 7, 8, I don't know how many ever billion people on Earth. I don't need all of them to conform to my aesthetic preference. Yeah. And my aesthetic preference probably change over time too. So.
Well, even on that aesthetic thing, there's
like you like old blonde black women or whatever it was. Bald, sorry, not blonde.
I did. There was never old in there.
I'm pretty sure it was...
No, there was no old.
It was old, bald...
No, there was no old.
Okay, fine. You're like, bald, sagging, fat...
Anyways, I was going to say that thing with... we were saying you don't want everyone to be bald. Sorry, you don't want everyone to be blonde.
Yeah.
V had this point where he was saying...
But you'd like everyone to be bald, you sick...
No, I wouldn't. V was saying... that people are always going about how V is obsessed with women with big breasts.
Yeah.
And he's saying he wants that because he prefers it. And it's not there anymore. When he's growing up, when he's a teenager, it was everywhere in the media.
Make the art for yourself. Why not? Yeah.
Well, no, when he was a teenager, it was everywhere. And it's like, this is a little much. Like, every single media woman has big breasts. And he wanted smaller. He's like, I want the variety.
Oh, so and he's a hipster. That's a problem.
No, he's saying like culture keeps swimming that we're only allowed one thing.
Yeah.
And his overall preference is for larger, but he's saying he does want it out there so you can compare. Like, you can look at a water painting, you can look at the oil painting. They're both pretty, you prefer the oil painting. Yeah. But you want both of them. You don't want everything to be oil painting.
Although for me with aesthetic in, like, art, right, if there's a bunch of it going on, like let's say medieval fantasy versus Mesopotamian fantasy or Aztec fantasy. Yeah. There's way less Aztec and Mesopotamian fantasy books. And people say, oh, it's so boring that it's all medieval Europe, all medieval. I love medieval Europe. Yeah. And if I make something, I want it to be medieval Europe because I want more medieval Europe. I want to make I don't want more of it out there. I want the stuff I make to be the stuff I enjoy.
Yes.
And that is what I enjoy. So I'm not going to try to redress it. Like, I could probably do an okay bit on, like, Roman fantasy. 'Cause I know a little bit about Romans. Or maybe a culture I know more about. Well, you don't need to know more about it. You need to know more than the average person about it. So my relative knowledge in Mesopotamian stuff is probably higher than my relative knowledge compared to the rest of the world in Roman. So maybe I could do a Mesopotamian fantasy. But
you could do Celtic with all the books you've got.
I could do Celtic fantasy or Norse fantasy. Norse is getting more popular, but I could do that. Or I could do Eastern European because I know a bit about that, but that's also getting more popular. And it's funny though, I've seen videos now where people say this isn't the standard Norse or Eastern European or Western European fantasy, and it's like everyone loved The Witcher because it was Eastern European and it was weird and it was different.
When I was growing up, Greek was popular.
And Norse, nobody knew about.
You were cool if you knew about Norse or Egyptian.
Yeah, and now Egyptian and Norse are like everywhere, and so people, and like Hades, it's made Greek old hat. It's like, oh, everyone knows Greek now. But
and so I'm a hipster that likes Celtic now.
And what's his Rick Riordan with Percy Jackson and everything. You know, that's kind of heresy. His books. I was so. the story, I always got it wrong, but it's from the Iliad, I think, maybe from the Odyssey, where Hercules' ghost visits the camp at night.
Yeah.
And he says, so Hercules came into our camp. Not the man, he was still in Olympus, but his spirit. Well, and the reason for that is because Hercules is both a man and a god.
Yeah.
And so the man died, and he has a ghost, but the god is still alive. They're the same person, but there's two of them.
That's interesting. So it's
So Hercules is the only demigod in Greek mythology.
Huh.
All the other sons of Zeus was in mortal form, so they're not demigods.
So,
like Theseus and
yeah, no, I was saying Hercules with that is like that general guy from Malazan, who Lord of Sorrow.
Yeah.
Decimultor.
Yeah, Decimultor, who Decembre.
Yeah, Decembre.
The Lord of Sorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. Because people thought he died, and so the people, God ascended, but it's not him.
Yeah, but it is him. It's just it's his god form. Yeah, and so Hercules is the same. Probably December might be based on Hercules even.
You're about to say it the other way around, weren't you?
They're very similar people too. Like they're these tragic best fighters on Earth.
Yeah,
they're actually very similar. Come to think of it, the only difference I think would be that Hercules was quite a people liked Hercules. Yeah. Like everyone liked being Hercules' friend, whereas Dancer, no, not Dancer.
Decimultor.
Yeah, but what was his Malazan name? Was it Dancer?
No.
Dancer's the assassin.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was called I don't remember. Maybe he didn't have one.
Was he Agent? No.
He might have.
Stormy
he was the first sword, I think.
Yeah, first sword, yes.
Yeah, but anyways, he is kind of a quiet, sad person.
And if he was to fight Hercules, he'd go, "Oh, I'm so good at a sword," and Hercules would slap him across the continent.
And he also gets quite angry. Well, Hercules got angry too, but Hercules was like a jovial, everyone loved sort of guy.
Yeah. Well, I was saying they're both very good fighters, but Hercules has the strength.
Yeah.
Whereas he has strength of will, Hercules just has strength. And so, sure, he's an amazing fighter, but his sword meets Hercules' club, and he goes flying.
I don't know who would win. That'd be kind of...
Well, it depends if he has the sword. If he has sorrow.
Yeah, well, I also don't know... I don't know if the Nemean lion would actually protect against his sword, because his sword is based on his will, and he has an unbreakable will, right? So
yeah, but Hercules is also ridiculously strong. So.
Yeah. And they're both also very skilled generals. They have a lot of similarities. But, so Percy Jackson heresy, because it's a camp of demigods, but there's actually only one demigod in Greek mythology, which is Hercules. But, yeah, I'm going to do more mythology based on what I like, not just to thin it out. So what V seems to like, actually, is the variety. And so he's going to make what he likes for the variety.
What she's doing.
Yeah. So going back to something though, like, so there isn't a, blonde or not. It's like, okay, tattooed or not, it's
bald or not.
Bald or not. It's a preference thing. But slavery, that's where Jesus gets involved, I think. Where.
So you have the guy in the gimp mask and the dominatrix over them, and it's like, I consent. And Jesus is like, no. Yeah.
Well, that's where the morals come in, and you say, should you be subjecting yourself to this on either side? And should you be making that... There are...
This I can and send it to the thinkers.
There are roots of thought. Okay, do you think this is true? Okay, there's multiple statements here. There's some I disagree with. But so first of all, I think it was the Leather Apron Club, who might actually be a neo-Nazi, I'm not sure. But he said something which was... Be careful which thoughts you let into what's the term?
Let out into the world?
No, tolerate. Like this, the ones that you let come into your mind. Mm. Because, they'll corrupt you, not all of them are good. Okay, so there's that thought. I disagree with that one.
I disagree with that one as well. And I think one of the best ways to look at it is with Wheel of Time. This dark one, Shamael, is whispering to you. And you say, I reject you.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing of... You're in a city square, right? And you have the madman on the box and he's ranting at people. And people go, he's an idiot. And they can go on with it. Or you could have the state where he's ranting and what he's saying is wrong. And so the state comes and you're saying things that are wrong. And they take him away. And now people can't hear what's wrong anymore.
Okay, but then, yes, so those are two good contrasts. And then let's go one further, though. Do you engage the man in a discussion about the merits and drawbacks of pedophilia? is that a discussion you're willing to have in your mind, saying, okay, what are the upsides, what are the downsides, why is this wrong, why is it right?
Well, I think you might have to have that of why is this wrong, why is this right. Because if you go off something of blind faith, like, I have this problem with cannibalism. I find the thought of it wrong. It disgusts me on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
I've had arguments and discussions about it. And I have some reasons I can say, like, it destroys your DNA. Like, that's one of them. But it goes deeper than that to me of why it's wrong. A more ambiguous thing than cannibalism, because a lot of people find cannibalism wrong, is organ transplants. I really don't like that. Like, if someone loses a limb, then you get a robot arm? I'm okay with that. I'm even okay with the concept of growing an arm from that person. So you take their stem cells, you grow them a new arm. Or somehow you have neutral stem cells, like this super cancer goo that you can turn into an arm. I'm fine with that, or you turn into a heart. Or even to an extent, like, this is kind of sickening to me, but not much, taking a pig's heart and giving it to someone. I can sort of, like, that doesn't make me gag as much. But taking another person's heart that someone else had, I find that vile.
Now, do you find the autopsy process vile, or do you find the actual organ giving? So
the actual organ giving.
Okay, so it's not the fact, like, so you would still, if I could just, like, duplicate your heart by touching it and then I had a heart in my hand, you'd still find that kind of weird.
Yes.
Where it's not the, like, you're cutting into someone that was a living being and ripping out their organs.
Like, if you took the stem cells in my heart and grew a new heart, like, you just had a needle, you went burp, burp.
But you don't actually mind the desecration of the corpse.
I do, but that's a different thing. I don't like corpse desecration, but that's not the reason for disliking the organ transplant. Like you said, if you could clone a heart, I still don't.
So yeah, the reason that these things, maybe you should talk about them, is because, yeah, everyone has a different line.
Yeah, and I don't...
And also you can't defend your position.
Yeah, I don't know why...
Well, if someone comes along with a good argument, you won't be able to defeat it. Yeah. So if someone like Sartre or his girlfriend, what was her name?
French communist.
Yeah. If they come along and say we should abolish the age of consent, and you haven't been having these discussions, you'll have no argument against them.
Yes.
You'll be like, well, we are French, we are logical, and therefore. Because that's kind of...
And that's what happened with a bunch of pedophilia in both France and Germany.
Yeah, well, because they're both very logical countries.
Yeah.
Like, they're logical in different ways, but they're both incredibly... Like, France, in many ways, is the most logical country on earth because they're like, well, this makes sense based on this principle and this principle and this principle, so why not? And therefore you get rid of the king and you go to metric and you go to... Yeah. Like, France is super logical. And then Germany is...
France on steroids.
Is logical in a different way, but in a very much... Yeah. Well... I'd say that Germany is logical, France is rational. Yeah. France is extremely rational.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have these discussions ahead of time about why pedophilia is bad, then you don't have any arguments for it. So you have to go, okay, so pedophilia. Some people are mature faster than others. That is true. And, if love is love, why would you be restricting that? Those are the arguments. But then you say, it is so easy to control someone who is
younger than you.
Especially a child.
Yeah.
Like, it's trivial to control a child with your words alone. And they also, if they're close enough in age that you could be their parent at a time when you still have a parent, because as Jung said, there's the metaphorical death of your parents when you reach a certain age and become an adult. If they are not old enough, because that age is like, 14 to like 45. Like, the metaphorical death of your parent can take a long time.
Yeah.
And if someone can be in that parental role, they're a god to you. And they can say whatever you want. That is not a relationship of equals. And a relationship of people who are not equal is like a master-slave relationship, much like this Dom thing. And we generally don't like it because then they have power over you. And now, okay, what's my argument against a power imbalance in a relationship? I don't have much of one because I haven't thought about it too much. But that's something, okay, now we should talk about this. Like I told you about the dream I had where there was that person, and I trust them absolutely, and they will never do me wrong, and anything they tell me is to keep me safe. And it's like, okay, that's messed up. Okay, so is like a sub-dom relationship. I'm pretty sure I've heard this before and been mocked by people who are sub and doms of it. Like, is there an equivalence to pedophilia? And you say, well, no, because the sub is consenting. The difference is that the sub has the ability to say no.
So
it takes more power to be a sub than a dom, actually, because the sub can end the whole thing, whereas the dom can't end it, right? Yeah. The dom can't stop pretending to be a dom, but the sub can say, no, I'm not obeying. This is over. So the sub actually has the power. That's the argument against.
So if you're wrestling with someone or doing martial arts, and they get you into a chokehold, like they're choking out, or they have you in an armbar, and you tap on their leg and you shout stop.
Yeah.
You never tap on someone's leg or shout stop if...
In a street fight.
Well, it's not even a street fight. We're talking about the situation. You never do that, and then you turn around like, haha, I have advantage, and you tackle and lock them up.
Yeah.
Because you violate that whole thing. So
you violate that trust.
Yeah, so the safe word in the sub-dom thing that they have, like bananas, the joke, has to be absolute. So there has to be absolutes to that. Otherwise, it is abusive. Like, if you get rid of that, then it is abusive. But even then, on that, there might be, like, psychological things to it further on. Of the same. So the sub has absolute power in the situation. However, psychologically, you put yourself in the demeaning position of being lesser.
So that's the fourth step, right? So you said, okay, the man you can't lock up. The man you have to let rave. And then you said you can also have an argument with the man and discuss the idea and take his side and take your own side. My fourth step, is it okay to become mad such that you are in alignment with him for periods at a time? Should you let your Jordan Peterson says, do not write things which aren't true. Yeah. Like, do not write an essay on something you don't believe, because eventually they'll start to believe it. I wrote an essay on Napoleon where it was like, okay, was Napoleon a good or a bad person? And you choose one. So I said Napoleon was a good person because I remembered more of his good things, right? And then after that, I definitely felt like Napoleon's like a much better person than I remember. Yeah. So should you
I have this problem.
Put yourself in the mind of a slave, even for fun, on weekends?
I have this problem that annoys me, which is whenever you talk about Mein Kampf, you are steel-manning Hitler's position a lot of the time with it, because it's interesting to steel-man's position.
And is it dangerous to put myself in the mind of Hitler? Is that dangerous?
You make him sound reasonable.
Yeah. Well, that's the scary thing about Mein Kampf, I think. Like I've said before, put the Communist Manifesto in every school. We would have no communists.
Yeah.
Do not put Mein Kampf in every school. And that's where the dangerous ideas comes in, right? I think some ideas are dangerous. I think Mein Kampf is a dangerous book. Hitler is a great writer, and he's very reasonable. And it's like, you don't want that in every school, because the kids will have no argument against it.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to think these through. And even then, he's got a lot of good points. He says a lot of stuff most people would agree with. And it's only his very last conclusion. And that's where it kind of slips in. And even then, those last conclusions, that's not him being duplicitous a lot of the time. That's him making a mistake. That's him going, this is the only solution I can think of, therefore it's the only solution.
Yeah.
Okay, all evil people are Jews. He has a lot of good arguments for it. And you're like, okay, wow, geez, all evil people are Jews. And you look in your own life, you're like, okay, wow, all evil people are Jews, or they were influenced by people who are Jews. And you go, okay, geez, wow, all evil people are Jews. And you can't really, it's true. And you can either bury your head in the sand and ignore the truth, or it's true. And then you go, okay, well, I guess we got to get rid of the Jews. And then you go, wait a minute. Are all Jews evil? And that's the part that he never made the connection, because that's the tricky. There's a whole section in my psychology textbook where they talk not about Hitler, but they talk about the difficulty of that reversal step.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, what's more likely? A person is rich, or a person is a dentist and rich?
Yeah.
What's the answer?
A dentist and rich.
No. It's more likely that a person is rich than a person is a dentist and rich. Because a dentist and rich is two categories, which means that some of those dentists will not be rich, and some of those rich people will not be dentists. So even if there's a 99% alignment between the two groups, one group is always more likely than two groups.
But that the fear of the all evil people are Jews, but all Jews evil, is, if we go to the Imperium with Warhammer, why they're terrified of psychers is...
Well, the danger they present
is all psychers are dangerous, but...
Yeah, well, I think that's a different question, right? Like, if all Jews came born with a nuke, then suddenly we have a different question about Jews.
Fair enough.
Because then you suddenly go, even if all Jews are good, what do you do? Even if 99.9... if there's one bad Jew every 100 years...
What I was getting at is all demon portals are psychers. But not all psychers are demon portals.
Yeah, but the threat level is so high with a psycher.
Yeah.
Like okay, the Gerudo, right? Should they kill all their male children? Because, not all their male children are evil, but every time one comes along, you get like a Ganondorf, and it's like, oh boy.
They only get one every 100 years or 1,000 years.
Yeah, I guess. And it's hard to say what the average is like, because Ganondorf has been around so long. But
he only pops up every once in a while.
Yeah. So then I think... So it seems like there are ideas that it is dangerous to have in your mind, right? And I think there's some that are more dangerous than others. Mein Kampf is at this level, and then there's some things that are even more dangerous to have in your mind. And to put in your mind of like, ooh, do I like this? Like, I don't know. You could probably... Like a scat fetish, right? Like you like into eating poop or something. You could probably...
Are you some Spanish politician?
You could probably get your mind into the mindset of liking... You could be, okay, well, poop, it has the same scent signatures as oranges, and if you thinned it out, you would start noticing that. So it's sort of this... it's kind of like when you have an intense taste like olives or wine, where the layers come through, and then you can get that orange scent, and the contrast is what makes it great. Or perfume is very similar. A lot of perfume is actually made from vomit or poop, and
yeah, I don't like dilution.
And so the link to liking perfume is very similar to the link to liking feces. And then you can also say, okay, and also poop, it can ferment into a sort of hallucinogen that makes you feel happy. It's sort of like nitrous oxide.
So the guy on the soapbox, though, he does have to be careful that Rotten Tomatoes may be thrown.
But what I'm saying is, do you put yourself in the mind of that person until you can look at it and say, because I think I can do this, where I can actually look at something and be like, oh yeah, I'm into that now.
So,
and do you do that, or is that a way to corrupt yourself?
So in grade 11 biology, we dissected a frog. And I was quite disturbed by the thought of dissecting a frog.
I'm getting kind of into like gay thoughts making you gay here, really. Yeah.
So dissecting a frog. I felt quite repulsed by it. It made me feel a little bit ill. I was like, all right, this is an assignment. The school can do it. I was young at the time, so I was like, they won't make you do this if they won't want to traumatize their students. You actually could sign a form to say like, I don't want to do this, but like, I'll just go through with it. And I mentally like blanked to myself while doing it.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I felt hollow. Like for the rest of that day, I felt like something was wrong with me in my head. Like emotions weren't working right. And then after that, I was like sickened by it still. Like the thought of doing that. And recently, there's a show that came on Netflix called it's about the serial killer who hunts serial killers.
Dexter?
Yeah, Dexter. And I saw the opening to it. I was like, oh, this could be slightly interesting. It's a detective show with like some spice thrown in. And I quite enjoyed Lucifer, which is about Lucifer being a detective in Miami or something. And so like, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. It's like a sort of devilish character who's also and like he kills one person in the beginning and it's kind of gruesome and it's like, not so certain on that. And then they get to the scene where like they keep coming across the body of these people who've been like cut into pieces and their blood's being drained. And I was looking at that there and I was like, no, I'm not watching any more of this. And part of it is like, yeah, I actually am strong enough to continue watching it. Like I could watch the rest of it. But I'm not sure I want to be the person who enjoys it. Who has watched the entirety of Dexter and now can watch it. Yeah. And that's why I stopped there.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've always wondered. Like, is that a strength or a weakness to avoid that sort of thing? Because you say, oh, I don't want to change and be that kind of person. But is that just your narcissistic ego not wanting to change? Or is that actually there's something sacred about this? Because, it'd be cool to be the hard-bitten detective. You look at the body, you're like, yeah, well, there's a certain heroism to that, right? Like, the detective's actually a hero, right?
There's something heroic about that. But there's also, it's not heroic, but there's still something good about the rookie throwing up.
Yeah, but should you shy? Okay, well, here that's the difference, I guess. In the line of duty, it's heroic to be exposed to those things. But should you go out of your way to expose yourself to these things? That's the question, I guess. Because then these guys are working to keep that away from you, and you're throwing that in their face. You're like, I'm going to seek it out anyways, and that gets kind of muddy there. So I really have to go pee. But the idea of so you put yourself in the mind of the slave, right? Or you put yourself in the mind of the dominator. Now, is that argument just a video games make you violent argument, or is that argument so it's porn addiction. Everyone knows that the classic thing is people watch more and more and more and more, and then they need more extreme things, and then they're going to snuff and whatnot just to feel something, right? It's true of anything. You have enough flashing lights. Like you play a bunch of video games with flashing lights, and eventually you need even more flashing lights, and more and more and more. And you need to just stop for like a day and be like, okay, the flashing lights are getting too, and then suddenly less stimulation is more exciting again. You put too much salt on your food. You need more and more salt and more and more salt. The sugar, it takes more and more sugar to taste sweet.
Maybe it comes then to addictive behavior, because with porn addiction, with a video game addiction, where you need more and more, there is managed consumption of things, and there's addiction, like an alcohol addiction. You can just drink alcohol.
Okay. Like salt. Yeah. People don't really have a salt addiction, right? Like, no. But you need more and more salt all the same. So now all of these things, I think, even the porn addiction, maybe not, alcoholism's different, but all these other things, even sugar, I think, to a lesser degree, you stop and it fades. And so maybe with the dom and the sub thing, you stop and you're like, okay, I just, it takes a while to come out of it, but then you're out of it. I don't think that's what aftercare is. I've heard about aftercare. I'm not sure what it is, but you come out of it and you're like, okay, and then it fades, and then you're good until next weekend. But needing to be good as well. Like if you need to come down from your state.
Well, we can come back.
But but altered states of mind are fun. People like drinking. People like drugs. People like meditation. People like altered states of mind. So that is domination, submission. That's another form of altered mind. It's a different way of meditation.
Can we apply the categorical imperative to it?
I don't think so. I don't think it could make a judgment either way, because you're saying like you must strive to do good, right?
Yeah.
And
the question right now is this good or not?
Yeah, but maybe you could say something more along the lines of, maybe this would also fall into the categorical imperative. Is it in alignment with yourself? But I really like. Okay, let's go extreme. Whips and leather and ball gigs, right? Those didn't exist 10,000 years ago, and people got along theoretically just fine without them. So I don't think there is but neither did writing or video games or whatever. And people, I say, if that's what is your purpose on the world, do it, because there's multiple expressions of the same purpose, right? But the surgeon can also be the berserker, and maybe we don't need berserkers and we need surgeons, or maybe we don't need surgeons and we need berserkers. And if we have a time where we don't need berserkers, you being a berserker makes you a serial killer, right? So maybe you should be a slave master, not a dom, or maybe in a time where we need slave masters, but maybe we don't need slave masters now, but you still need to be doing something. Maybe you should be a middle manager, or maybe you should be a dom instead of a middle manager. Maybe
I would rather someone be a dominatrix than a middle manager,
because it's hard. Everyone's different, so it's hard to put morals onto a variance in human enjoyment, right? Like, or in experience. It's like, I like being the person in control. I like being the person controlled. Okay, a game I used to play in daycare is very fun. I think we called it doll or something, or a mannequin, maybe. And the idea was that you would just kind of stand sort of loose, and the other person would manipulate your limbs, and then you had to hold them in place. And the goal was to not move. And so they'd try to put you off balance by putting one leg up or tilting your hand over, or they'd start putting like bowls on your head or something, or they would like tickle your nose or whatever. And it's a fun game. It's like this sort of like body control versus creativity. It's kind of like Twister.
Yeah.
Is that a sub activity, right? It's like this sort of, I like being controlled. I like being, and the other thing I find kind of weird about,
man, your dominatrix fetish started early.
No, the sub one, right? Because I guess it depends which side I enjoyed playing more. Yeah. Well, the thing is, I enjoyed being the doll more because then I could show off my balance. So does that make me dominant or submissive?
Okay. Anyways,
because I'm like, No, I've got a very domineering personality.
You should go to the bathroom.
Yes, I need to. But okay, I'm still on the fence. I think Jesus needs to be consulted, but maybe Jesus is into it.
No, Jesus isn't.
I don't know. He's into all sorts of stuff, no. Okay, you don't think Jesus is into the whips and stuff? What was the whole crown of thorns and the cross?
Punishment. He didn't
want
that.
At the life of every saint. What is their greatest moment of every saint?
Getting murdered.
What is, and not just in extreme ways. Okay, watch The Passion of Christ, and then tell me that there is not a sadistic, masochistic tendency within the Christian faith, because the suffering of Jesus is very important to the faith. Like, I can barely stomach screenshots from The Passion of Christ. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're... It's like they dumped an entire bottle of ketchup on the guy.
Yeah. Special effects gore, I actually find worse than real gore.
Yeah. Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? Like, I think with real gore, you like, the wounds make sense. Like
I think part of it is I actually know what blood looks like as well, and a lot of the time special effects blood just doesn't look like blood.
But when you cause a wound, like there's a sort of there's a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But with I don't know, something with the special effects, it just kind of makes it off. Now that said, puncture wounds in real life, I look at them, I go, ooh, I have this little tingle in my abdomen where I'm like,
You said causing a wound causes that for me.
Yeah.
I hate the thought of causing wounds.
It's puncture wounds for me. I don't like puncture wounds. Yeah. But again, when I was younger, right, didn't like hunting. Now, could I shoot an owl? Yeah, probably. I haven't shot anything, I think. No, I haven't. I haven't shot any living things. But I probably could if I needed to. And I wouldn't enjoy it the first time, but I'd get used to it, right?
Yeah, no, I've had to...
Yeah, you've killed with mice and stuff.
Yeah, that's not pleasant.
Yeah, and you've killed mice in brutal ways. Like, with hand... Like, you've meleeed. I don't know what the term is.
With a log.
Yeah, with logs or knives or whatever.
No,
yeah.
You don't use knives, you use a log.
Yeah.
You use a large plunging object so you can't see what you did.
Yeah. But there's that sort of thing, right? Or, there's a case recently someone had to kill a deer with a knife. Or they didn't have to in the end, but, killing a deer with a knife. That sort of thing. Yeah. It's something you're like, okay, I can do. Like, and you don't like it, but it gets easier in a way. It gets easier in a way, right? Yeah. You're like, okay, I now know I'm the person that can do this. And it's like, okay, but so when you put yourself in a mindset, you actually change. And, maybe it's just ego being afraid of change. Maybe you go to the Dom club, you Dom around a bit, you sub around a bit, you change a bit, and you realize my identity isn't contingent on not doing this or doing this. And I come out and I'm still the same person, just with more interests, right? Like, because you realize how resilient you are. Like, your ego can fit that realm. You just change a little thing here. Like, I used to have this big thing about, I've never broken a bone, I've never been stung by a bee. This is a core part of my identity. Yeah. It's so lame, right? And it's like, okay, I've done them now. Like, who's more interesting, the guy that's done it all or the guy that's done nothing? It's like, do the guy that's done it all. Because there's nothing special about not doing something.
Yeah, well, my thought's like, I don't drink alcohol.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't make you special. Yeah. It's like, what's more special is someone that went on a great big bender and it's like, I quit, I'm done. And like, okay, that guy, he knows, he's been on both sides of the equation, he knows what's what. And so, that's, all I'm saying is, that's why I know Jesus needs to be involved.